The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. It's a beautiful day in the bottom of the Great Lakes, and we have a great show today. Lots of wonderful guests, but I want to start here. A week ago today, women and their allies marched all over the country in support of abortion rights, and a week later, they are in jeopardy all over the country. And I'm joined by Kelly Baden, who is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at the State Innovation Exchange, which is a national resource and strategy hub for lawmakers who want to push the progressive agenda. Kelly leads that organization's reproductive rights program aimed at developing a generation of state legislative champions on reproductive rights and health. Boy, is that timely. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm very happy you're here. Well, the Federal Appeals Court just reinstated the Texas bounty hunter plan. It criminalizes anyone for assisting in an abortion. Anyone, anywhere in the country, I might add, is deputized to enforce that law through the courts. And it looks like the Supremes are taking up a case that may ignore stare decisis and overturn Roe. What's going on?
Yes, lots going on, and much of it really quite devastating. And as you referenced, as of last night, we are once again seeing the constitutional right to abortion effectively meaningless in Texas. We had a little bit of relief earlier this week, as you noted, but as of last night, that abortion ban is back on, and it means we're facing some serious really legal whiplash about abortion in Texas that's really going to reverberate across the country. You mentioned there's another Supreme Court case, and so we really have these kind of two similar but different abortion bans, the Texas one and then one out of Mississippi, that are now snaking their way through the courts. The Mississippi case is what we thought would be the big kind of question around whether Roe v. Wade and nearly 50 years of legal precedent will stand. And that hearing is going to be on December 1st. And then in the meantime, we had this kind of surprise shadow docket in the dark of night a few weeks ago, decision by the Supreme Court to let this other Texas abortion ban stand. And so we're really facing some, first of all, of course, real harm on the ground, right? Patients in Texas have been spending the last several weeks, if they need an abortion, trying to save up the money to go to New Mexico or Colorado or even to Illinois to get the abortion care that they need. That certainly means that some people probably are not getting the abortion care that they need, right? That is expensive, that is time-consuming, and it is logistically challenging. So already we have a situation where folks are not being able to actually get the abortion care that is constitutionally their right to get in the United States.
Yeah, at least for the time being.
Exactly.
Tell me, how many states have passed, how many states would you expect abortion to be illegal in if Roe is overturned?
Yeah. Well, I would be significantly worried about half of states, if not right away, then a little bit after that kind of Roe gutting or overturning might happen. So we think that, something like 36 million women of reproductive age would be losing their constitutional right to abortion in their own state, right? So something like 8 states have a trigger ban, which is that law that states have proactively passed to say, hey, 12 states have that trigger law. As soon as the Supreme Court acts, we are ready to say abortion is illegal in our state. Then there's 9 states, though, that have abortion bans on their books that predate the 1973 Roe v. Wade decision. So they wouldn't necessarily automatically be enforced, but they could. So we're definitely talking about many more states and many, many millions of women and other folks who need abortion care who would really be at risk of not being able to access it.
Now, in some of those states, the majority of people, not just women, but the majority of people in those states support abortion rights, and yet they're likely to be made illegal.
Absolutely. I think there's this misconception that abortion is highly polarizing among Americans. And while it is in some ways, it has remained consistently true that a majority of Americans polled, usually between 6 or 7 out of 10 Americans, want to see Roe v. Wade remain the law of the land, right? So they want legal abortion to remain. They might differ over some of the specifics around what kinds of abortion restrictions are acceptable in their mind or things like that, but actually keeping abortion illegal in all 50 states is a pretty strong American value, and it's been pretty consistently supported by most Americans over years. And so these laws and this decade of an avalanche of abortion restrictions at the state level is not coming from the people. It is not the will of the people.
Yeah, it goes to I'm going to take you off topic a little bit, but it goes to the current threat against our democracy, where it seems that the right wing is willing to say, we don't want to live in a majority rule country anymore. We are sick of it. We have other beliefs, and we are going to change voting laws. We're going to change districts. We're going to make it possible for those who share our views to be the ones whose voices are heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's very clear that the same states where we have been seeing attacks on reproductive rights and health and justice are also the states where we see attacks on voting rights. They are also the states, not surprisingly, that haven't expanded Medicaid, haven't made important policy steps to actually improve the well-being of women, men, children, everybody in their state, right? And I think to your point about democracy being at risk, yes, that is what is incredibly alarming, and what I think is where we need to look next to say we clearly can't rely on the courts anymore to protect our legal right to abortion, our constitutional right to abortion, right? The Trump-shaped Supreme Court has taken that protection away. And so we have to really look at different paths to reclaiming those rights. And, I would argue, of course, the work that I do, I know you talked about state innovation exchanges, is around really focusing on that power of state legislatures and legislators. And so really looking at what are the sort of structural changes that we could make at the state level to make sure our state legislatures, who consider 100,000 bills each year, right, and have a really direct impact on everyday Americans, that they are actually more representative of the people that they're supposed to be serving. But these twin risks of voting attacks and attacks on abortion are closely intertwined.
Well, talk a little bit, since you brought it up, and I love the topic, about what we can do at the state level that would protect and preserve what has, at least for most Americans' lifetime now, been the right to make this choice.
Absolutely. And actually, Illinois is a really good example of some of the proactive things that states can and have done. So states, of course, can remove those pre-Roe criminal abortion bans that might still be on their books. Again, even if they're not enforced, it's important to remove them. We've seen in recent years Nevada and New Mexico do that. So that's really powerful. States like New York and Illinois have proactively codified abortion rights into state law. Several states have also focused on not just the legality, which of course is important, but also the access, right? Things can be legal on paper, as we know and have seen, but not necessarily actually accessible to the people who need them. And so some states have been able to address that particular component. So in Maine, for example, in recent years, they have, and California, they have ensured that advanced practice clinicians can provide early abortion care, right? Really saying like, hey, we have rural areas in Maine, and there might be a shortage of physicians, but there's no shortage of advanced healthcare providers who can provide early abortion care, right? Actually making it a little bit easier to get care. Looking at things like insurance coverage for abortion. Unfortunately, the Hyde Amendment since 1976 federally has prevented folks who use public insurance from being able to use their public health insurance for abortion care, with very limited exceptions. But states have their own Medicaid dollars, right? And so they can actually do that differently. And we've seen some action in recent years for states to say, hey, it actually doesn't make sense that somebody who is pregnant and on Medicaid can use that health insurance coverage for their labor and delivery, childbirth, prenatal care costs, but not for abortion care, right? That's actually fundamentally unjust. And so they've made efforts to remove that. So there's quite a few things that states can do, and several have been, and certainly not enough, and we need to see much more.
How do you begin to even think about getting the states that have enacted bans to move in a different direction?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think so much is about how we, of course, turn out our grassroots supports, turn out voters, and really kind of figure out what that disconnect is between the folks who get elected at the state level and the opinions and beliefs of the people they're representing. Because, again, we are looking at a case where people don't actually want to see abortion banned, and yet, for example, in Texas, that's what the majority of legislators were able to do in that state. So I think there's a component around building power, around, legislators actually really speaking to and understanding the needs of their constituents. There is a role for the courts, of course, as we look at the protections for voting. There's a role for Congress as we look at federal voting protection, federal abortion rights protection. Congress recently passed the Women's Health Protection Act, which is an important step in thinking about a national level of protection for abortion rights outside of the courts. And then again, I'd argue that long term, there's some structural challenges within state legislatures themselves that we should be looking at to see how we might address those structural challenges that in a way that would allow more folks to actually have representation in the Capitol. So just a quick example, right, that many legislatures are part-time and very low paid, right? And so it means that there's only a certain kind of person who can take that job, where they are working very heavily for a couple months out of the year, not getting paid a lot, and then they sort of have to go back to their communities and figure out how else they're going to make a living when the legislature is not in session. So it means there's a lot of wealthy retirees or independently wealthy people who can then run for office and hold office because it fits into their life a little bit better. So I think there's some, there's some great kind of candidate endorsement and training programs out there. So many great sort of post-Trump era ways to get young people involved in thinking about running for office at all levels. And then there's some of these longer-term, I think, structural changes that we should be looking at.
Yeah, we talk a lot about those things here on this show, and in an effort to bolster our democracy against the attack that is being waged against it right now. I have to ask a kind of hypothetical question. It has been easy for Republicans to grandstand, really, to the minority, but very determined minority in their party on abortion and on other issues because they couldn't win, right? The Constitution was the Constitution. They could say whatever they want. It wasn't going to make a real difference. But now it might. Now it actually might. All this anger might actually result in overturning Roe. It's been a 40-year campaign that maybe they didn't mean, but now it's there for real. If they're successful, will there be an enormous backlash? Will the majority of people rise up and say, you can't do this to us? And I ask this because for all of those 40 years, the issue of abortion has been electrifying and motivating for the right wing. And the left has sort of yawned and not taken it as seriously as they might have.
Yeah, I think we will unfortunately have a chance to test that theory, especially looking at next year when the timeline for this decision in the Mississippi Supreme Court case, the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health, will likely come down in June, right? And then we will be going right into the November midterm election. So I do think we'll see a chance to test this theory. I feel as optimistic as possible, noting the very challenging and pretty devastating legal landscape right now, that actually can happen. Polling in Texas right now is showing that no one, not even Republicans, have majority support for this vigilante abortion ban in Texas.
Right. Well, that ban is there's so many issues with that go beyond even the question of abortion. Right? I mean, it's
exactly.
Yeah,
and I think our job as activists or advocates, me and folks like me and a lot of people I work with, is to really then draw that connection between that the Texas abortion ban is terrible, yes, because it has this really horrific, outrageous incentivizing of anybody to target anybody else and go after them for actual financial damages if they assist in an abortion after 6 weeks. And it's also terrible because it is a ban on abortion at 6 weeks, right? I think all abortion bans are terrible. And I think this one, when people actually can better understand what we're talking about, how early that is in pregnancy, how difficult it already is in so many states to get abortion care. There's so many legal obstacles somebody has to jump through depending on the state that they live in. There might be a waiting period. There's money to think about, all of those things. That will be horrific enough on its own that will motivate voters as well to the polls.
Well, 6 weeks, let's be clear. There are a lot of women who don't know they're pregnant at 6 weeks.
Right. When you're talking about really what 6 weeks means, it's since your last menstrual period. It's if you kind of map out the weeks, it's not really 6 full weeks into pregnancy. So even the name of that is a little bit not fully correct. Every pregnancy is different, and I think it's pretty outrageous for anybody to expect that somebody would both know that they were pregnant by then, have made the decision if they decide to get an abortion, and then would have figured out where to go, when they're going to go, get an appointment at a clinic, and get there, right?
Yeah, it's a ban.
Yeah.
It's just a ban.
It's a ban. Yep. It's absolutely a ban.
Yep. What do you suggest people listening here, and although we have some listeners around the country who listen digitally, the radio signal is all around the bottom of the Great Lakes. So we have issues in Michigan and Wisconsin as well with Democratic governors who are vetoing the craziest things that the legislature is coming up with. But what do people do in this part of the country if they care about this issue and want to make a difference?
Absolutely. There's actually a lot to do, so I'm so glad you asked that. I mentioned Illinois already has some protections. There is more Illinois can do. I know some folks are working to repeal the existing parental involvement law for abortion that's on the books in Illinois, so there's work to do there. I mentioned earlier there's a clear data showing that people in Texas who need an abortion are coming to Illinois for that abortion. So there's actually, ways that you could donate to local abortion funds and just help people get there if they need abortion care. Michigan and Wisconsin both have had proactive reproductive rights bills in the last couple of years. Of course, as you mentioned, the state legislature themselves are not have not been friendly enough to pass those bills, but that means that there's an opportunity there to get really heavily involved in your local politics if you're in Michigan or Wisconsin, and certainly anywhere. And then I would just argue this is an issue that elected officials at all levels are tackling. We talked about, of course, Congress a little bit, so there's always work to do there. We're talking a ton about state legislatures. It is also a local issue. Cities and counties have been able to take proactive steps around abortion rights. Portland recently just passed created essentially an abortion fund from the city using city dollars to help people get abortion care if they can't afford it. And then there are cities and towns and counties who have gone in the other direction. Texas, well before this abortion ban, saw a spate of local counties in the state declaring themselves to be, abortion-free places, and that they would not allow abortion in their town. Again, not actually legal, but they did it anyway, and it generates interest on their side. And so there actually are things that your city council could do, or your county commission, and all the way on down to school board where, things like sex education can be determined, right? Things that are actually directly connected to this issue that we're talking about of bodily autonomy and people's healthcare rights.
Well, it's a lot to do. I think people are motivated all over the country to step up and try to do it. I'm really grateful for your time this morning, or this afternoon here, and I hope we can talk again, and we'll have a lot to talk about soon, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. This issue is not going away. It hasn't for 50 years, and I appreciate the time and you covering this, and I appreciate all the listeners who are motivated to take action, and there are things for you to do, and I hope you'll do them.
Well, thank you, Kelly, very much. We're going to go and take a quick break, and then I'll take some calls on this issue at 773-763-9278. Stay with us.
This is John Daniel, President and Business Manager of the Sheet Metal Workers of Smart Local 265. The principles that guide me are rooted in the simple belief that united we stand and divided we fall. We the people must recognize that a diverse environment with unique points of view is the foundation for success. A culture where labor and management work together inspires innovation, promotes inclusion, creates a sustainable growth for business, the workforce, and our communities. When the entrepreneur's vision is developed and improved with the voice of a unionized workforce, you build more than just a product, you build a stronger future. I want to personally thank everyone who voted for President Biden. He believes in unions. Blue Collar Biden signed the American Rescue Act of 2021, which secures vested pension benefits. It funds improvements of indoor air quality in K-12 schools and provides additional Paycheck Protection Program loans to support small businesses. This is John Daniel from Smart Local 265. Join me in celebrating a return to sanity and a sustainable middle class. Stay union strong.
This is the Consumer Attention Lifeline with an urgent message. A federal jury unanimously ruled that Roundup, a popular weed killer, was a substantial factor in potentially developing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Victims who used Roundup and were later diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma have been awarded millions of dollars. One simple phone call is all it takes to find out if you qualify for a cash settlement. Call now for a free confidential case review. It only takes a few minutes, and there are no fees for our service. Thousands of people may have been exposed to this dangerous weed killer over the course of decades. This is a time-sensitive matter, so you must call now. If you or someone you know used Roundup weed killer and were later diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, this could be your lifeline to substantial financial compensation. Just call 1-800-737-5088. Call 1-800-737-5088 now. For terms and conditions, visit yourrights.legal. Call 1-800-737-5088 now.
We've all been spending more time indoors than usual, but FinishingChicago.com has an offer to update your interior. Whether your space is residential or commercial, for a limited time you can save up to 25% on painting and decorating. FinishingChicago.com has the most dynamic interior spaces available from industry-leading union craftspeople. That's union quality, efficiency, and industry-leading expertise in your home or commercial space. Visit FinishingChicago.com to find a contractor in your area. This unprecedented access to union quality labor at a reduced rate is only available for a limited time. Revitalize your spaces with fine decorative upgrades applied by the most knowledgeable craftspeople in the industry. Whether it's a new color or transforming your walls into something truly special, our contractors have all the options. Take advantage of FinishingChicago.com's Update Your Interior savings before they're gone. For up to 25% off your new finish, start with FinishingChicago.com.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, we're back, and David, I think you're in San Francisco. We're taking your call. Before you say anything, I'm going to another guest in 2 minutes, in a minute and a half, so be quick.
All right, no sweat. At first, I thought she was talking about overall health care, and I was going to raise some stats about part of the propaganda that the Republicans have used for years is that, the private sector of health care is going to be damaged by this and that we'll be paying higher prices because the taxpayers are going to pay for medicine. But the reality is that administrative costs of the insurance companies are as high as 36%. And single payer is typically below 2%. So the amount of difference between 34% spread of administrative costs are going to savings. So what America can do to buy in bulk, to buy health care in bulk, is an enormous savings. And it's actually cheaper to do single payer than it is to do these money-grubbing HMOs that don't have healers. They just have money grubbers.
Well, I hope you'll stay listening. We're going to talk about that some later in the show. 2 members of Congress are going to be on, and my next guest runs one of the biggest healthcare systems in the local healthcare systems in the country. the Cook County healthcare system. So stay with us. Thank you for your call. And now I'm going to turn to talk to somebody who I don't think anybody here needs an introduction to. Tony Preckwinkle has been the president of the Cook County Board for, I think, 10 years. I think this is wrapping up her 10th year in this. She was in the city council. Previous to that, has been a big part of the Chicago political and governmental scene. Chairs the Cook County Democratic Party, one of the most storied party posts in American history. Tony, welcome.
Well, thank you, Edwin. I'm glad to be on your program today. Your listeners should know that you and I served in the city council together, and then you went on to be regional director of Housing and Urban Development, and were a tremendous assistance to us in the city of Chicago, particularly in our CHA redevelopment. So thank you.
Thank you for remembering. Although, don't date yourself. It was a long time ago.
Listen, it is what it is.
Hey, but speaking of longevity, before we dig into issues, you and I are both friends of Tim Black and Zenobia, and Tim, who is 102 years old and now in hospice care. Do you want to take a minute and talk about him and what he's meant to Chicago?
Well, he's a member of the greatest generation. He served in World War II and came back to Chicago to be a teacher and a political activist, a civil rights leader. He has been a champion of the disadvantaged, the marginalized, the oppressed his whole life, and we're all indebted to him for his good work. We want to extend, our best wishes to him and to Zenobia.
Yeah. Great people, great citizens. You and I spent time in public life. You don't have to be an office holder to make a huge difference in the world you live in. And there's no greater example of that than Tim.
Yeah, that's true. Civic engagement takes lots of forms. And as you say, you don't have to be an elected official to make a tremendous impact.
Yeah. All right. So our thoughts are with you, Zenobia and Tim. All right. To the issues. You have been at this a while, and I got to say, in all the years, the decade that you've been in charge of the county, this past year with COVID ravaging both our people and budgets, it's got to have been one of the hardest.
Yeah, we've lost 700,000 Americans. I mean, it's astonishing. And here in Cook County alone, more than 11,000 people have succumbed to the disease. It's a nightmare, both in terms of the devastating losses to our families and our communities, and, the economic cliff that we fell off in March when we had to impose, stay-at-home orders in order to try to keep people safe.
Yep.
So,
when you run a hospital.
It's been a challenge. Yes, we run two hospitals, actually.
Yep.
Stroger is our flagship hospital, and a much smaller neighborhood hospital, Provident, in Hyde Park.
Right. And how do you think about this year, the changes you had? What didn't you get to do because you focused on COVID that you wanted to do coming into the year? And what sort of were the extraordinary things you had to do in the healthcare system to protect us?
Well, I've often said this is sort of the worst time to be an elected official that I can imagine. I mean, the last time we had a global pandemic was 100 years ago, in 1918, as we were coming out of World War I. So it's a sort of once-in-a-century occurrence. And I don't know what the worldwide, the global figures are. The last one I heard was 5 million people. But that's got to be an underestimation.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
so many countries do not have accurate ways of reporting deaths or reporting the things to which people succumb, which take them from this life. So 5 million people is probably a gross underestimation. And as I said, in our country alone, 700,000 people. 700. Now, most of the people who've succumbed, it's true, are senior citizens. But we've begun now to lose many more people in midlife and younger. I went on Friday to the service of a young person, I think young, who was 40 and succumbed to the disease. Mm-hmm. So we're losing not just the precious assets of our seniors, but we're also losing young people in the prime of their lives who, could go on to make tremendous contributions, not just to their families, but to their country. And that has been a staggering loss. And for our healthcare people, my daughter is a nurse, so I hear about this on a daily basis. It's been just tremendously stressful. First, serving when there was no vaccine, and now being vaccinated themselves, but seeing patients come in, very, very ill who have not been vaccinated. And of course, then the challenge we have is we don't have a lot of really good medications to support them. Remdesivir, I think, is the principal medication that we're using, but we need better medications for people who are in the hospital. And of course, whenever I speak, I encourage people to get vaccinated because it's just it's what you can do for yourself and for everybody you love to ensure their health and safety.
Do you have any idea how many COVID cases were treated by the county's hospital system?
No, I don't know that, but I'll tell you at the height of the pandemic a year ago in the spring, we had 240 beds in our hospital occupied, and half of them were COVID patients.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was unusual. I think that all of our healthcare systems were really taxed and overwhelmed by folks who were ill from the disease. So,
well, I don't know how you deal with the personal stress of being in charge of it this year. What do you want to? Now you're running again. What do you want to accomplish? Seems like you've gotten a lot done. What do you want to get done in the next 4 years?
Well, we want to continue to improve the quality of care we deliver in our health and hospital system and access to care for those at the margins, either uninsured or underinsured. So, and healthcare is half our budget, so that's something I've had a longstanding commitment to. Mm-hmm. To continue to work on criminal justice reform. I mean, we've worked hard to try to ensure that the poor have the same rights as the rich, that is to be assumed innocent until proven guilty. And in this county, as in elsewhere in the country, we were locking up people in jail and detaining them until their trials for things like low-level drug offenses and shoplifting and property crimes of various kinds, not paying your child support, traffic. I mean, just crazy stuff. And people would stay in jail because they couldn't pay nominal bonds. They didn't have the resources. And so we've dramatically reduced our jail population by trying to ensure that people who are accused of nonviolent crimes don't automatically spend the time between their arrest and the disposition of their case in jail.
Right.
And our jail population is down by about half from when I started. It was at 11,000 then, and it's about 5,700 now, I think the last I heard. So those are the two big buckets that are our legacy obligations. And now we have $1 billion in federal resources to try to invest in our county in ways that will help us recover from the economic losses caused by the pandemic.
Well, talk about that a little bit. The Tribune sang your praises for what you've done. I think they've forgotten how much they hate me. I don't know what happened. Anyway, no, I should be grateful for, thank the Lord for small blessings. Yep.
Anyway, we've got $1 billion. The way in which this works is you've got 3 years to allocate how you're going to spend it, and then 5 years to actually spend it. So we're dividing up the allocation, $333 million for the next 3 years. Some of that money will go for pandemic-related expenses, and there continue to be those. Our vaccination programs are providing our staff with the appropriate PPE to deal with people who have COVID. Reconfiguring our jail to allow for physical distancing in a congregate facility. All of those expenses, are ones that we've incurred as a result of the pandemic, and we'll invest in that. But 2/3 of the money will go toward investing in our communities in one way or another. And I always talk about the fact that 1/4 of the families in Cook County don't have access to broadband. And in an era where we expect people to work remotely and to learn remotely, 1/4 of our families are just, incredibly handicapped by not having broadband access. And that's not it's not just broadband access. Then they have to have inexpensive internet access, and then devices, tablets, and computers.
I'm sort of shocked at that number. You expect that in rural America, where it's so just physically difficult to have the infrastructure. But a quarter of the families in Cook County is an astounding number.
Yeah. So here's the thing: we made a terrible mistake. We should have made internet access a public utility. The same way that water is a public utility, right? Necessary for life, right? And instead we turned it over to private companies, and there are parts of the county where it's not, you don't make a lot of money trying to serve people. And so there's a disincentive for the private companies that provide internet access to serve those folks. So what we've already done before this federal largesse was apply for a state grant, and we're grateful to the state for providing it, to run fiber optic cables down I-57 into those parts of the county along the right-of-way, into those parts of the county that didn't have internet access. We've already done some of that. We'll do more of it with these resources or infrastructure dollars if they ever pass an infrastructure bill. So one thing is, one example, and these are things that I speak to. I mean, we're going to do a lot of different things, but we have to invest in the Southland. The Southland is the part of the county that has struggled most economically in the last several decades. And if you look regionally at what's happening around the country, those regions that have the least inequality have the most economic vibrancy. And we have tremendous inequality in this region, and we haven't recovered as quickly from the depression of 2008 as other regions. And, of course, we haven't recovered quite as quickly from the disaster that came with the pandemic. So we've got to invest in broadband is one thing, regional development, in this case the Southland, and then, in my view, we've got to invest in young people, 16 to 24, who are out of school and out of work. Because unless we can get those folks attached to the workforce and in school and on a path to productive adulthood, we're going to lose them. So those are the kinds of things we're going to invest in that I always talk about. I mean, we're proposing a guaranteed income program. We're going to invest in small businesses. We're going to do a variety of things. We're supporting folks who are behind in their rent and their mortgages through our emergency rental assistance program and our mortgage assistance program.
Right, and you're taking on college debt too.
Right. I mean, all of the. Clearly, we face a lot of challenges in this country.
Yep.
We're going to try to address as many of them as we can with the resources available to us.
Well, speaking of resources available, will you be patient with us while we take a quick commercial break and come back?
Of course.
Thank you. We'll be back in just a moment with President Preckwinkle.
Joan Esposito, and here at WCPT, we love pets. So much that we're spotlighting an adoptable, adorable dog or cat every month. So many deserving pets are waiting for their forever home. We've partnered with community shelters and our sponsors, Love for Dogs Pet Grooming and Mark Drugs, to talk about why rescue is best. It's all on Joan Esposito Live, Local and Progressive. See our current adoptable at WCPT820.com.
I'm David Hochberg. It's Saturday. You're a veteran who served our country and can use a VA loan to either purchase a new home or refinance your existing home, but you don't know who you can trust. Team Hochberg respects your service and has VA loan experts available right now to answer your questions and help you secure a VA loan. Team Hochberg has helped thousands of radio listeners secure VA loans, but we can't help if you don't call 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. Homeside Financial Legal Housing Lender, NMLS 1124061.
This is Gary Menzel from Roofers and Waterproofers Local 11. If you're looking to have a new roof installed this year, let Local 11 Residential Roofers Union send out Filato Construction, serving Plainfield, Joliet, Crest Hill, and the south suburbs. Filato Construction employs skilled and trained OSHA 10-hour certified workers who will work safely while on your roof. Local 11 residential roofers earn a living wage and receive family health care and a retirement pension for their hard work. When you hire Filato Construction, you get competitive pricing, professional union installers, and the peace of mind knowing the job was done right. So if you're a homeowner or a part of a homeowners association and you're tired of a leaky roof or tired of the neighborhood roofer who just can't seem to get it done right, give Filato Construction a call at 815-740-5461. Filato Construction also installs solar roofing with a certified Local 134 electrician. Learn more about residential roofing at rooferslocal11.org.
Hi, this is Jason Bissell from Chicago Community Acupuncture at Milwaukee, Devon, and Nagel in Chicago. The first thing the National Institutes of Health concluded acupuncture could actually treat was chemotherapy-induced nausea. This is back in 1997. Since then, research has shown that it can reduce or eliminate all of the side effects of chemo and radiation: fatigue, neuropathy, pain, dry mouth, and most importantly, impairment to the immune system. It should absolutely be a part of everyone's cancer care regimen. All the top hospitals use it, including Memorial Sloan Kettering, where I was the first acupuncturist to serve as a postdoctoral fellow. If you're battling cancer, we can help. People who get acupuncture along with standard care have fewer side effects, greater quality of life, greater survival times, and greater survival rates. And at Chicago Community Acupuncture, we charge about half of what others charge. Call us at 773-853-0920, 773-853-0920, or go to chicomacu.com, CHICOMACU.com.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, and we're back with President Preckwinkle, the head of one of the biggest counties in the country. And Tony, I think it's so important, and I talk about this a lot on the show, for people to understand that politics, that people who work in this profession, that politics is part of what we do, but only part, that governing is an enormous task of complexity and discipline and hard work. And you've just rattled off a bunch of issues that are enormously complex. Running a hospital system, trying to deal with gaps in broadband service, trying to deal with some of the enormous social inequity and clear legacy of racist decisions that we've made over the years here. I think hearing from people like you about the actual work is a tonic to some of the insanity around our politics.
Well, I think one of the great, aside from the fact that I disagree ideologically with the Republican Party, one of the great disservices that the party has done in my lifetime is demean government, denigrate government workers, and challenge the notion that government can actually serve people. I mean, I recall, Ronald Reagan saying, government isn't the solution, it's the problem. Well, you can believe that, but why did you run for president of the United States if that was the case?
Mm-hmm.
So I think those of us, we've seen especially since the 1980s and perhaps before that, this demonizing of government that has made it very hard for all of us, to do the work we do. And the work is difficult in the first place, but it's particularly difficult if there's so much sort of poison in the political environment.
Yeah, there's more of that poison nationally than here, but there's some right here. Can I transition to talk to you about politics and the Cook County Democratic Party?
Sure.
Just a little bit. I know, I've known you a long time, and I know you to be a phenomenally good government leader, a social and political reformer, and as your friends at the Tribune write today, a fiscally sound leader. As party chair, though, you got tied to Joe Berrios and Ed Burke, and that you paid a huge price for that. Do you think that being the party chair was worth what it cost?
I got elected alderman in 1991, and I ran for committee person in 1992 because I had twin goals. One, to provide the best service I could to my constituents in my government job, and the other was to try to support good Democrats, good leaders who could help us, run the city, run the county, run the country, run the state. Mm-hmm. I started working in political campaigns when I was 16 years old, and I got elected to office when I was 43. So I spent almost 30 years before I was ever elected to office working for other good people. And, of course, I continue to do that as a Democratic committee person. We've got to have good leaders in government and good leaders in our party.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we, and frankly, I understand that people have a lot of trouble with Joe as assessor, but as party leader, he worked very hard to make the party more inclusive. We started regularly slating women, black people, brown people, Asian people, and the party previously had been pretty much, whites only.
That's correct. People need to remember that. That's absolutely correct.
I'm not saying that was exclusively whites only, but pretty much, and it was pretty rare that we slated women or black people or brown people to be judges, for example. You look at the judges and it's all people with Irish names,
Mm-hmm.
So, and when I became chair of the party, I continued in that vein. I mean, we've got as a party to try to put forward really good leaders and then to work hard to elect them. And we've got sort of a two-party system in this country. And if we don't, as Democrats, stand up for our values and try to elect good people, we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I know that I paid a terrible price for being head of the party. But I believe that it's important that the party have good leadership. I think I've provided that leadership. And sometimes you just take the body blows that go with it.
Well, and thank you for that answer. And it's important. I raise it not just to bring up a subject that's painful, but we look right now at what's going on in Congress, where really the Republicans are irrelevant. They don't care about governing, so all of the responsibility falls to Democrats. And the Democratic Party is enormous and diverse, just like the country. The difference between Joe Manchin and AOC is as big as the difference in the country on policy. They both believe in the democracy, which separates them from the other guys. But you do have to say, if you're trying to build an inclusive party, that not everybody's going to be like you and not everybody's going to share your views. The more narrowly we define what it means to be a Democrat, the harder it is for us to be the majority party. We have to be inclusive, not just by race and gender, which is the way I was talking about our Cook County Democratic Party, Mm-hmm.
but also, geographically and ideologically. If we don't do that, I think, we betray our values. And unfortunately, what's happened in the Republican Party is that the band of who's a Republican has gotten considerably narrower than it used to be. Just as the band of, who's a Democrat has has gone from Joe Manchin to
right. It's very broad, very, very broad.
Yeah, but that makes it hard to govern in a way, right? Because your party is so diverse, and trying to get everybody to agree on anything is definitely herding cats, as Nancy Pelosi could tell us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the strength. The strength of the party is the same strength of the country.
Yeah, it's got legitimacy when you are broad based. I mean, we don't have European style single issue parties. That's not who we are. It's not who we are. No. We do the negotiating about our differences through our party system, and at least on one side come up with a platform that reflects those. The other side didn't even bother.
I think this moment in particular, as we struggle with the debt limit and the budget and how to respond to the pandemic. And, we see the Republicans, as you pointed out, in lots of these areas just absenting, from the stage. It makes it even more of a challenge for us if we can't count on any Republican votes on the critical issues that face the country. I mean, this is an extraordinary moment.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. That's why we need. Since the Democratic Party is really the only one that's trying to govern, it's so important that it be led well, that we identify good candidates, that we run good candidates, and that we continue to push for the kinds of values that are inclusive and also at the same time fair to taxpayers. Right?
Yeah, from the very beginning, I said, whatever else we do, we have to be fiscally responsible. Mm-hmm. Because one of the albatrosses that the Republicans have had to tried to throw around our neck is, we're fiscally irresponsible. All we are is tax and spend Democrats. Well, I mean,
it's a lie, Tony.
Of course, it's a lie. But I mean, what I said, look, we have to be fiscally responsible because that gives us the latitude to talk about the perhaps more controversial public policy things that we need to do to make things right in our county. So, I'm glad that the Tribune is in favor of my fiscal responsibility. I hope they're in favor of the other things we're trying to do. All
right, there's something else about you that was in the news, and it was that you had some, or your car had some personal, the guy driving it had some personal experience with carjacking, which turns out to be something that's terrifying much of the city right now. A, is that true? And B, the three people...
So it is true. It is true. A member of my detail who was on duty was outside my house waiting to walk my dog with me. So I'm always accompanied.
Yep.
And two young men tried to carjack his car. It was dark. I don't know. There's a light on top of it. It's a sedan. It's not an SUV. But, you have to be pretty dumb to try to carjack a car that's got a police light on the top of it. But anyway, thank God he's okay. This could have ended in a lot of ways that would have been pretty terrible. And I'm grateful that he's okay. There's an ongoing investigation.
Yep.
This is the kind of violence that so many of our residents in the city are fearful of, and rightly, because we've seen this uptick in violence. I attribute it in part to the pandemic, which has made people, stressed out, anxious, worried, and the economic collapse, of course, that followed it. I mean, these are extraordinary times, both in terms of a national health crisis and a national economic crisis, and I think that's taken a lot of people just kind of off the rails. It's not just that we've seen more murders and shootings, more suicides, opioid deaths. So we're seeing behavioral health challenges, and I think the uptick in violence should be considered part of that. Because of the pandemic and the economic aftermath. I mean, people are just, some people are desperate, and some people are, as I said, the wheels have come off the bus. So.
Yeah, very dangerous, though, combination when some people are desperate and other people are afraid. It makes it very hard to deal with this problem in a sensible way.
What the county has done, and we've, early on in my term, I said, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the jail and the courts, and we're not spending a dime on trying to prevent people from getting in the criminal justice system or going back to it after they've been released. So we began to give out grants to community-based organizations that were doing violence prevention work, anti-recidivism work, restorative justice work. We've put aside now, I think we've got a fund of $100 million to try to, over the next couple of years, plus the money we're going to get from the federal government, to invest in the kind of programs I just described, helping community-based organizations on this violence prevention, anti-recidivism, restorative justice work. It's critical. And we need, this summer we ratcheted up even more, faced with the challenges that we saw. So we found additional money in our budget and reallocated it to some of the community-based organizations we were already supporting as they tried to do this work. But it's a pretty unnerving time for all of us.
Yeah, it sure is. It certainly unnerved other members of our local government a lot these days. So I applaud you for staying cool and focused, while this stuff is going on. We are running out of time. I've got less than a minute left with you. Is there a message you want to leave voters? And by the way, speak not just to your voters, but people are listening in Michigan and southern Wisconsin and northern Indiana too.
Sure. I mean, the first thing I always say whenever I speak, and it's the way I began my budget address, was to beg people to be vaccinated. It's the most important thing that we can do for ourselves and for the people we love and for our country, frankly, because we're not going to be able to rebound and recover from the economic challenges caused by the pandemic unless we have really high vaccination rates. Our health and hospital system imposed a vaccination mandate effective October 1st. We have a mandate effective October 15th for offices under the president, and I encourage government leaders and corporate leaders to have vaccine mandates so that we can get as many people vaccinated as possible. This is just, 99% of the people who are dying now of the pandemic are unvaccinated. 99%.
Well, we got to unfortunately leave it there, but that's a great message to end on. Get vaccinated. President Preckwinkle, a great pleasure to talk to you as always, and now with everybody listening to us. It's good to catch up.
Thanks, Edwin.
You bet.
Invite me back. I'd love to talk to you.
I will. Thank you. We'll be back in just a minute, and stay tuned. More interesting conversations coming.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brad Siegel. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is putting President Biden and the Democrats on notice. Jim Forbes reports.
In a letter, McConnell told the president Republicans won't be helping raise the debt ceiling in December. He cited Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's fiery speech in which he hammered the GOP over the issue. McConnell argued Schumer's comments, quote, poisoned the well even further and mentioned Democratic senators were visibly embarrassed by him and for him. 11 Republicans voted with Democrats Thursday to break a filibuster and send the debt ceiling to final passage. I'm Jim Forbes.
A missing Texas toddler is reportedly safe and being reunited with his family after a massive search. KHOU-TV in Houston says the sheriff of Grimes County confirmed the 3-year-old Christopher Ramirez was found alive today. The boy was last seen playing with a dog when he apparently wandered off. President Biden is committing the U.S. to allow up to 125,000 refugees. Brian Shook has the details.
The declaration for fiscal year 2022 is a major increase from the just over 11,400 that were resettled by the White House this past fiscal year. That's the lowest amount admitted in the history of America's refugee program. The new increase is something Biden vowed to reach earlier this year after the number was significantly reduced under former President Trump. He set the all-time low cap at 15,000. I'm Brian Shook.
Former President Trump will hold a rally in Iowa today for the first time since the 2020 election. Thousands of supporters are expected to turn out at the Iowa State Fair grounds this afternoon as he teases another likely White House bid in 2024. Trump's visit to the Hawkeye State, which holds the nation's earliest presidential caucus, has many Republicans buzzing about just when he'll make it all official. Brad Siegel, NBC News Radio.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT Willow Springs is powered by ComEd. Lower your energy bills and reduce your carbon footprint with the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, I promise all of you that the afternoon won't go by without some comment from me and some conversation around Mr. Trump and Iowa and what that means for America. But I have something else far more pleasant to do right now, which is a conversation with the alderman of the Great Sixth Ward in Chicago, Roderick Sawyer. Alderman, are you on?
I'm here, Edwin. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, I'm thrilled you're here. And I want to tell you, and I want all our listeners to hear this. I served with your dad. And
I remember well.
He was a great man. I mean, I was 27 at the time and didn't know anything. And the more I reflect as I get older on his courage and kindness and his dedication to this city, and all that meant, I just get more and more impressed with that man I didn't know as well as I should have, even though I thought he was terrific.
I really appreciate that. That's the very kind words. And he was a great guy. I mean, not just saying that because he was my dad, but as I got older, I really appreciated what he had to do, and especially during the turbulent times after Mayor Washington's death. It was really, he had a rough position that he had to take care of, and he did it, and he did it well.
Yeah, he did, and with grace that I think very few other people could have managed.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
I really appreciate it. Yeah. Those words don't go unnoticed.
Oh, well, I mean it. I really mean it. Terrific, man. I say this with frequency. I love talking to aldermen for lots of reasons, but one, I want to give you the opportunity, it's my favorite thing to do, talk about your ward, talk about the community, what's going on there, what do you love, where are the best places to go eat, people who are listening, where should they come visit, what do people care about there? And then we'll get to the city stuff.
Oh, great. Well, those that don't know, I was born and raised in the 6th Ward, lived there my entire life. I'm very proud of what we're doing. I represent the areas of Park Manor, Chatham, Inglewood, and Chesterfield, Auburn, Gresham. All great communities. All try to do what's right and do the best for the well-being of the city. What I will say, we have some great places. We have some destination places, Soul Veg, those that are aware of, Limbs Barbecue, so you can go from one extreme to the other.
Yep.
From pork products to vegan. Brown Sugar Bakery is another staple. If you really want some good desserts, you got to go see Stephanie at Brown Sugar. We're starting to really get some restaurants now. We have one that's been extremely popular over the last several months. Ooh Wee It Is on 83rd and Wabash. Mr. and Mrs. Walker, husband and wife couple, doing a great job. The food is great. When they first opened, they would get lines, 1.5 hour, 2 hour wait just to get into the place.
Wow.
So we're really excited about it. We're happy for them. And,
yep.
Even though we have to go through those neighborhood issues that, successful places tend to have.
Yeah, like where people parking, and is that a problem for everybody else? And, yeah.
You know it well, right? You know it well. Having to get by all those kind of things, it is a great place to come. So I really want the listeners to come out, check it out, get a bite to eat,
yep.
Go get some cake.
83rd and Wabash, everybody.
83rd and Wabash. Please come out and visit.
Yep. Well,
but those are just some of the highlights. We have lots of other places, from Casagna Cafe, a great coffee shop in the Inglewood community. We have places all over that we're very, very proud of, and more are coming online, which we're also happy about.
Yeah, and I hear that for the first time in a long time, property values are going up in Chatham, and
that is correct.
Yep, that's great.
Well, the interesting thing about that, and I tell people it's kind of a double-edged sword, but what I will say, the great thing about the Chatham community, for example, people don't leave. So it was always hard for us to get comps, for getting market value comps, because once people move to Chatham, they don't go anywhere else.
That's right.
They raise their families, they're not moving, they're there.
Yeah, and I don't think people understand what a strong sort of neighborhood it is, how the block clubs function, and how everybody supports each other and knows each other. I mean, it is really like the definition of American community.
It is. I'm dependent upon my block clubs. I depend on them for insight and information. They're the ones those are my eyes and ears in the community.
Yep.
And I appreciate their spirit and their volunteerism to make sure that I can do the best job that I can do.
Yeah. People, they lean on government a lot, but really our city works because, in the strongest neighborhoods, it's neighbors doing what they have to do to make sure that everybody gets taken care of.
Absolutely correct.
Yep. You also have some challenging neighborhoods and some very tough issues that you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yep.
I mean, we have areas that are challenged, but the spirit of those individuals are strong. They do step out. They come to meetings. They're engaged. They jump on me. They call demanding service, which they should be getting. And my job is to advocate for them to make sure they get the services that they deserve and have needed for, way before I got there.
Yep.
So I try to do, try to be the best alderman I can be every day, trying to serve these individuals. And sometimes the job gets tough, and you know it well. If you do the job well, it's a very tough job. It's 24/7 all the time.
I had a woman, forgive me for telling a story, but I had a woman who had a decorative stone lion in front of her house, and it got stolen, and the police couldn't find it, and she was upset. And I took a couple of strong guys, and we went to Maxwell Street, which was this big open market back then. And I went with a picture of her lion, and I got a lion that looked exactly like it, and brought it back to her and said, "Hey, the police found your lion." That's the kind of thing. And she couldn't have been happier. She was a great advocate for me for the rest of the time I was in office. That's the kind of thing we do, right? We got to you got to take care of people however you can.
I remember some years ago, it's funny you mentioned a story like that. A lady called with some dead dogs in her front lawn.
Right?
So she called 311. At the time, Animal Control only had 2 people out there, doing real work.
Yep.
Back then. So the lady called, in the morning and said, "Hey, I got these dogs on my front porch." So we made sure we called Animal Control. They said, "We'll get to it as soon as we can," all that. So it got to the afternoon, about 3:30 maybe, and no one got the dogs. So I was like, "Hey," I called my ward, Soup, that's, he just got off work. He got off at 2:30. So I said, "Soup, come on, let's go." He said, "Where we going?" I said, "We got to go get some dogs." I really had to go with big, giant bags.
Yeah.
And they were 2 big dogs. They weren't little dogs. They were 50, 60-pound dogs.
Yeah.
We had to go pick her. The lady was screaming at us. She's like, "About time you all came." I said, "Miss, I'm not Animal Control." He looked at me. She said, "Is that you? Alderman Sawyer, is that you?" I said, "Yes, me. Come to get your dogs. I'm coming to pick your dogs
up." Yeah.
So this is what we do.
I hear stories like that from aldermen in every ward, and I don't think people who sort of look at city council on TV understand just the role that aldermen play in their neighborhoods. Yeah. It's really important.
Yeah.
Really important.
Yeah, we're the everyman for the neighborhood.
Yep.
We kind of have to do everything, or have to be versed in everything that could go on.
Yep. Well, I love those stories, and thank you for taking the time to talk about the community and the ward. Now let's talk about the city a little bit. And you've been involved in, all of the important debates in the council, from policing to budget. But I want to just first focus for a second on health. You chair the Committee on Health and Human Relations, and oh my gosh, because of COVID, health has been a pretty big issue this last year and a half.
I never expected it was going to happen when I first became chairman of the Health and Human Relations. That was always, you've been on council. You know what kind of committee it was considered.
Yep.
But here comes COVID, and now it's in the forefront right now.
Really important, and not so much in passing legislation related to COVID, because there wasn't that much, but in holding to account the people in city government whose job it is to keep us safe.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And it's been very important and challenging. But you know what? I will say that we've been working well together, and it is a challenge, both with the legislation and with the compliance, and also, now that we have all this money, making sure the money's well spent.
Right. Right. And there is a lot. I want to get to the budget in a minute, but I'm trying to understand the mayor's changed approach to mandates. First, she said city workers would have one, and if they didn't get vaccinated, they would be terminated. And then she backed off, and I think it was just last night. I mean, I was a little groggy. It could have been the night before, but I think it was last night. She released a new policy that says workers can get tested twice a week on their own dime. The city's not paying for it, but and if they do that, then they can stay at work. A, do I have that right? B, what do you think of it, and what accounted for the change?
It's a tough situation. I heard the end of President Preckwinkle talk about the importance of vaccination, and I echo that as well. How important it is to be vaccinated, but we still have those for a variety of reasons, whether they be religious or other reasons. Some are interesting, I would say, but it's a very tough position to have to be in, to have to tell people what you should be doing as a matter of public policy. I support, it's hard to say that I do support the initiative that we encourage everybody to be vaccinated. And people just have to understand there got to be consequences. Sometimes you have to be tough on situations, even though they might not be the most popular decision to make. But
Yeah.
the important decision you have to make.
I mean, and you're also not saying it's illegal not to get vaccinated, but for the people who have to sit next to you, have to work next to you, they shouldn't have to. You got to protect them too.
Absolutely. And that's really what the vaccination is about. It's not about yourself. It's about the people that are around you.
Yep.
Your loved ones, your family members, your coworkers.
Yep.
Do it for them.
All right. I want to talk to you about the budget, policing, and a couple other things, but I am at the point in the show where I got to pay the bills. Will you stay with me over a commercial break?
Oh, no problem.
All right. We'll be back in just a couple minutes with Alderman Sawyer.
The Hal Sparks radio program.
Governors of pro-Trump states, they must show their fealty towards Trump by mitigating any support for the health and safety of their own citizens against COVID so that they don't upset him or the minority of his supporters amongst the Republicans in their state, which are often the majority of the voters in their state.
Hal Sparks, Saturdays from 11 to 1 on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
This is Gary Menzel from Roofers and Waterproofers Local 11. Are you happy with your job, or are you looking for a new and exciting career? Wouldn't you like to get up early every morning and head into work so that you could be home early to take your kids to baseball, basketball, or gymnastics practice? Consider a career with us. We're professionally skilled roofers and waterproofers, OSHA trained for on-the-job safety, and our union is growing. Construction remains strong in Illinois and Wisconsin, where we just recently opened a brand new apprenticeship training center near Madison. Union roofers and waterproofers work outside in the fresh air every day, and we get paid well for the hard work we do. We have family health care and a pension plan that you'll be glad you have when you're planning your retirement someday. We want you to earn a living wage and learn to work safely. So if you're ready to join Roofers and Waterproofers Local 11, give us a call, 708-345-0970, and learn more about us at rooferslocal11.org.
The old way of living with diabetes is a pain. You've got to remember to do your testing, and you always need to be sticking your fingers. The new way to live your life with diabetes is with a continuous glucose monitor. You simply apply a discreet, easy-to-use sensor on your body, and it continuously monitors your glucose levels, helping you spend more time in range and freeing you from painful finger pricks. If you test your blood sugar at least 4 times per day and inject insulin at least 3 times per day, or use an insulin pump and have private insurance or Medicare, you might be eligible for a CGM with little or no cost to you. Call U.S. Medical Supply today for a free benefits check. We offer free shipping, 90-day supplies, and we bill Medicare or your insurance directly. Call now and say goodbye to finger pricks.
800-417-0851. 800-417-0851. 800-417-0851. That's 800-417-0851.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
And we're back with Alderman Sawyer from the great 6th Ward of Chicago. Alderman, we're talking about health care, and can I ask you one more question about it?
Sure, of course.
Chicago has what's reported to be the biggest disparity in life expectancy across districts. There's a 30-year gap between the zip codes where people live the longest and where they live the shortest. And that is there are a lot of definitions of inequality, but none is more stark than losing years of life. It's just unconscionable. When I tell people about it, they look at me like I'm crazy, almost in denial. Could this possibly be true? And when they find out it is, it doesn't matter where they are on the political spectrum. It's an appalling thing. What can we do? And what is being done, and what can we do to address this horror?
Well, I don't know if you're aware, Edwin, I'm a big proponent of reparations. And I've been pushing that for a long time because, particularly the African-American community, we are the worst in negative outcomes and the last in positive outcomes. And what you're talking about is the biggest one, which is our ability to live. And we have to do more to find out the root causes of why our life expectancy is short. Is it our diet? Is it, the environment? Is it, what we're doing to ourselves? Is it cultural? And we have to dive down into it because it's disproportionately affecting black people. And we have to do something about it. And I think that if we look at the epidemiology of it, we have to dive down into, why we are who we are. And black people have been getting the short end of the stick, from experimental testing, from, lack of resources, bad diet, all that. And we have to do better. And we have to make that concentration to do what we can to make sure that happens. And I think reparations is one of those ways that we can address it directly and get people the help that they need.
Talk a little bit about your reparations proposals. Evanston did one thing. You kind of have a different idea. Talk about that.
Yes, and don't get me wrong. I respect and appreciate what Evanston has done to raise awareness of it and get it out in the open. But what we have to do is focus on the core, and it's not all just money, the 40 acres and a mule kind of concept. We have to worry about environmental issues, education, all these things. Well, the first one, how about an apology? My bad. We never got an apology for slavery. If we're really going to dive into it. But it's not all, money is an important part of it, but what we have to do is repair the mind and soul of black people that not have a slave-type mentality. We have to, show that we're truly free, because oftentimes we're acting like we're not free. And people don't like to have that conversation, but I'm always willing to have it. And that's one thing that we lack in government, quite honestly, is having true and honest conversations about what ails us and how we can cure that. And I think these are one of the ways that we can do that through the process of repairing what's wrong with what's ailing us as black people.
Alderman, you have raised a profound question and topic. One I didn't expect, but one that I deeply welcome. These are such hard conversations. Talk a little bit about that feeling of what does it take to make a group of people who have been abused by the broader society for a long time. What does it take to make people act like they are free, responsible, and that their future is their own? What does it take?
Well, again, one of the things is acknowledgement.
Yep.
There was, I don't think there's been a proper acknowledgement that slavery was not, and it's not just slavery, it's the Jim Crow laws and all the things that happened after slavery.
Well, or in Chicago, when all that wealth was stolen through contract sale of homes.
Exactly. Like you say, things that have occurred during our respective lifetimes.
Yep.
So it's not quite over. We still experienced it from lived experience. So we have to get over that, first of all. That's important. And we have not done that yet. And again, I think one of the ways that we acknowledge that and deal with it directly is through the repair. Talk about the things about that what ail us and how we fix it. We never had that discussion. When we talk about the murder rate, everything that we talk about, that we could talk about, what ails our city. I think that all dive down into what we should be doing to repair people so they won't be aggressive towards oneself.
How do we do that? Is it like the truth and reconciliation process that South Africa went through?
I think that's a part of it, yeah. And again, if I knew all the answers, I'd bottle it and sell it to you right now and hopefully make a lot of money. But again, until we really dive into it and directly talk about it, we'll never get anywhere. We're still going to have high murder rates. We're still going to have high death rates. We're going to have all the things that have been ailing us, and they're going to continue to happen until we dive down and really talk about how do we fix it. And it's got to be a deeper dive than what we've been doing. We can't just throw money at it. Money is, in and of itself, is not the solution.
Yeah. So when you say reparations,
right now,
your focus is on repair, right? Not funding. It's on repair, and then you'll figure out what it costs.
That's correct. The money is more of a federal issue. Us on a local level, we can be talking about the other pillars of reparations and how it is important to us, and still deal with it and still talk about the money. But the money is really a federal issue that has to come from larger groups than myself and us. So,
what does an acknowledgement? What does an acknowledgement of the crime of slavery look like? How does America say this terrible thing was a part of our history and integral to our history? What is it? How does that happen, and what does it look like?
Well, we have to do it on multiple levels. I've had this conversation with some of my colleagues who, I would say maybe some of my more conservative colleagues that said, well, Rod, you're doing well. You're a lawyer and you're an alderman. You're representing your community. It doesn't bother you. I said, no, you don't understand. Yes, it does. It has bothered me. I was able to step over it and overcome it, but I still have problems dealing with things because I'm black and because I may still have a portion of that slave mentality or enslavement. I don't even like to talk about slaves. We were not slaves. We were enslaved. We were not slaves. But, the process of slavery
happened.
Still works with us, and it's still part of us to this day.
Yep.
We have to break that.
Yep.
So, your explanation was a good start. If the powers that be would say something to the lines of what you just stated, that would be a great start.
Yeah, when people try, or the New York Times has something called the 1619 Project, it suddenly becomes a cause on the right to say that it's an example of everything wrong with the country. It's appalling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's troubling.
Yeah. All right, in the couple minutes we have left, I don't know what we could talk about, police issues, but maybe let's talk about redistricting. The census figures are in, gains in the Latinx community, losses in the black community. How's that going to impact the new ward map? Will the aldermen have enough votes to avoid opening it up to a referendum? And, I hate to ask this, but you were in a close election last time. You're going to have a new map that's going to be easier for you?
Well, you know what? I don't concern myself with things like that. I worry about doing my job.
Okay, let's take the last question off the table.
I worry about doing. I don't worry about. Sometimes you have to do things that are rough.
Yep.
That may seem rough.
Yep.
But,
I know
that's part of what we have to do.
Yep.
We have to make tough decisions sometimes. So
are we going to have a map? Are the aldermen going to agree on a map?
I believe we're going to agree on a map.
Yeah.
I have the utmost confidence that we will agree on a map that will maintain our communities of interest and make sure that they stay together. We will make sure we have adequate representation from the black, Latino, and white communities together, because we're about, and I'm maintaining that I'm hoping that we will have an Asian ward somewhere.
Yep.
And I'm thinking that as far as the Black Caucus is concerned, I'm thinking that we have those same ideals in concert with one another, and I'm thinking that we're going to make sure that happens.
Yep. And there is no Alderman Fioretti this time that's going to lead you to draw some of the craziest lines we've ever seen.
Right. I think that we'll have more coherent maps that are truly representative of the interests of the communities that we serve.
Yep.
And I think it'll work out well. And I think we'll do it well this time.
So I'm thrilled to hear that. I'm thrilled to hear it because the other conversation, of course, in Washington right now is, will they be able to pass Biden's agenda? And, they have diverse Democratic members of Congress, just like you've got diverse members in the city council. And in both cases, the legislators are saying, you know what, we're going to be able to make a deal. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to put the people first and bridge our differences, and showing everyone in the world that democracy can work.
It's a challenge. It is a challenge, but I'm thinking that we're going to be up for it. I have utmost confidence in my federal partners that they'll do what's right. But like you said, we have a diverse crew, even on the Democratic side. There's a lot of opinion on what should be done, and I think that, again, I enjoy the conversation. Me personally, I think that's something that's been far lacking in governmental work, in politics, that we don't talk.
Yep.
We don't have conversations, and I think out of conversation, ideas will come forth, and I think that we'll get better ideas. Similar to that old adage when people are around the truck, when the truck hit the viaduct and it's stuck, and then everybody's arguing about how to get it done, and a little girl comes up and says, "Why don't you just take the air out the tire?"
Yep. Listen to everybody. Yep.
Right.
All right. We're at the end of our time. I've enjoyed our conversation a lot. I hope we do it again. I will be at 83rd and Wabash soon. I'll let you know when I'm coming down. If you're in the neighborhood, maybe we'll get together.
I'll be more than happy to join you, Edwin.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, and I hope to do it again.
All right. We're going on a quick break, and we will be back in a moment.
Rick Unger.
We need both parts of this infrastructure. We need the physical infrastructure, but we also need the human infrastructure. It's critical. It is important. It is a major step forward, probably among the most significant legislation that we have seen since the Great Depression. It is important stuff. It does important things for people that really need to be done and should be done.
Rick Unger, weekday evenings at 6, right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
O'Reilly. Syntec is back and better than ever at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Syntec is a premium full synthetic motor oil option at an affordable price. Right now, get 5 quarts of Syntec full synthetic and a MicroGuard Select filter for just $31.99. Syntec is formulated for today's engines to minimize friction, heat, and wear. Try Syntec today exclusively at
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Don't mind me, just sneaking out to go to Kohl's. The home deals right now, they're too good to pass up. Like up to 40% off Cuddle That's bedding, up to 50% off the cutest fall decor, and up to 25% off Ninja kitchen appliances. How can I resist? You can even get 15% off or 15, 20, or 30% off with a Kohl's card. So yeah, I'm going all in for fall, and I can't even wait. Select styles. Offers end October 17th. Some exclusions apply. See store or Kohl's.com for details.
I'm David Hochberg. It's Saturday, and you're constantly complaining about paying PMI on your FHA loan, but you've done nothing about it. If you took out a 30-year fixed loan after June of 2013 and your loan-to-value was greater than 90%, you will have PMI for the entire length of your loan. Team Hochberg has helped thousands of radio listeners refinance out of their FHA loan to eliminate their PMI, but we can't help if you don't call 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. Also, financial legal housing lender, MLS 1124061.
The whole goal is to point people to something bigger.
What if the news was different and covered more than one side of the story? Not just the who or the what, but the why. What if it took you closer?
It's information, and people want it.
So you can make up your own mind. What if the news lets you think for yourself? Introducing a new point of view. Yours. Newsy. Watch Newsy free on your TV. Learn more at newsy.com.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Hey, we're back, and I'm honored to be joined by the remarkable Jan Schakowsky, the representative of Illinois' 9th District. Jan, you are a leader in the progressive wing in Congress, a champion of women's rights, and for those in your district, a tireless advocate for your constituents. I have watched what you've done over the years and am in awe of your ability to bring people together on tough issues and make progress in a place as hard to make progress in as the United States Congress. And in the interest of full disclosure, my daughter was an intern in your office this past summer and loved it. So welcome.
Thank you. I loved having her. I said, wait a minute, Eisendrath. That sounds awfully familiar. Yeah.
Well, she was telling me how much enormous work goes on for the constituents in your ward and how very seriously everybody takes that work.
Yeah,
your district, excuse me.
No, my district. But, I want to tell you that even through the Trump years, it was the constituent service, being able to often make life-changing help for constituents in the district. And my interns did a lot of that on the phone, taking down the problems and then helping to follow up. It was really fabulous.
Yeah, you manage a really good operation.
Yes, we're proud of it. Yep.
Oh, we have so much to talk about in only a half hour.
Okay.
Let's start, because you are such a leader of this wing, the ongoing intra-party negotiations over the president's agenda. America is a big and diverse place, and the Democratic Party reflects that size and diversity, and the Democratic Party is the only game in town when it comes to governing right now, because the other guys don't believe in it. I have a lot of listeners who, when it was the day to vote last week and then the vote didn't happen, there was a sizable panic and finger pointing and all of that. I think that's because most people are not used to the trauma of actually getting legislation passed. And I'm wondering if you could give them some reassurance that the Democrats will come up with with the bills that will make America proud and move us forward.
Oh, thank you for that. No, people should not fret. The Democratic Party is not divided very much. About 96% of Democrats in the House and the Senate wanted the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which was not called. And the reason for that is that we want both that bill and this much larger package of the Build Back Better bill, the things that are going to provide the day-to-day things that Americans want. Child care for their children, elder care, prescription drug affordability, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, free preschool and community college, really making an investment in the climate crisis right now. All these things are in this other bill. So yes, we were prepared, and when I say we, it wasn't just the Progressive Caucus, but most of the Democrats said we have to have both together. And here's why, Edwin. If that bill had been called by itself, it's about $1 trillion bill. Everybody wants their roads and their bridges to be safe. Yes, we want mass transportation, of course. That's in that bill. But if that had passed, there were enough Republicans, certainly, and some Democrats as well, even in the House, to say, okay, I'm done. We don't need to pass this other bill. And to leave that behind would have left most Americans behind. And that's why the president came to the Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives on Friday, the day after that bill was supposed to be called, and he said, we are going to do both of them together. Now understand, and everyone should understand, right now in the House of Representatives, we have only 3 Democratic votes to spare. The Democrats have a slim margin in the House and almost no margin in the Senate. So any 3 people have great leverage to hold things up. But we couldn't take the risk of just supporting the infrastructure bill, which is very focused. And by the way, the calculation was done that most of the jobs that would be created, about 90% of them would have gone to men. I have no objection to men getting jobs, but jobs that women have in child care, in elder care, in teaching, and all of those care economy things, mostly those are women, and those jobs would not have been there for the women. So we're happy. We were happy when the president came into the meeting and said, we're going to do both. So that's what we're hard at work getting done.
And you're confident, notwithstanding the finger pointing that's going on at the far edges of our party on both sides, that we are going to come together and get it done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
Because I think even the 3 or 4 in the House who were insisting on the that we vote on the infrastructure bill, they want all these things because the American people want and need these things. It's to be against the Build Back Better bill is a bad vote for Republicans if they choose to do so.
Let's make it a little worse while we have the chance, because the things that you mentioned, child care, elder care, the price of community college, let's leave climate change to its own category, but those 3 things, while we're going to fund them, America is not leading the world in these things. America's behind everybody else. Even when you fund them, we're not going to be some crazy socialist state that you hear about on Fox. We're going to be barely where other wealthy countries are.
Exactly. And in fact, there was a report in the New York Times that the United States is really an outlier when it comes to funding child care. We do about $500 on average a year for toddler care, whereas the average for all these other countries that you mentioned, wealthy, developed countries, is $14,000. Germany spends $18,500 per year on toddler care, on preschool care. So, we are way behind. $500. Even with this bill, we're not going to nearly catch up with the average in countries around the world.
Right. And the level of social discord in the United States costs us more than this bill is going to cost us, and it'll just bring us close to everybody else, notwithstanding the whining on the right and the lies about what we're trying to do.
No, it's absolutely right. We did in the Rescue Act, we did the child tax credit, which unfortunately has run out, and we're trying to make it permanent in this Build Back Better bill.
Yep.
And what that does is what we saw is a decrease in child poverty by 4%. So we're still not all the way there. We still have children in poverty, but we have to take these steps. And the other consequence of not doing the child tax credit is that women and child care, women can't go back to work. That's one of the explanations of a somewhat lagging employment rate in this country, because women are stuck. I'm not saying there aren't some men that also do child care, but mostly women do child care and elder care. And so we got to catch up for our own sakes.
Yep. Let's I'll get to climate change in a second. I want to stick with women because I think the Supreme Court has got on its deck and in its crosshairs their opportunity they've been waiting for to say stare decisis is a funny idea when it applies to Roe versus Wade. What can, if anything, can be done in the legislative branch to protect the rights that women have had for most of the adult life of most of America's living citizens?
Well, the House of Representatives, and it didn't get a lot of play, or at least not what it was due. We passed, a week ago Friday, the Women's Health Protection Act.
Yes, you did.
Codified. Yeah, we did. Meaning, for the first time in the history of the United States, a House of the Congress is majority pro-choice. That's never happened before. Even among the Democratic caucus, that's never happened before. And we passed this bill that said Roe v. Wade is the law of the land. Now, some pundit said, oh, well, it's not going to pass the Senate. But I want to tell you something. It could have a big effect in the election coming up. Because I'm going to tell you, Edwin, I don't know exactly what it looks like. Women are not going back. Women are not going back. And Roe v. Wade was not the beginning of women having abortions.
No.
What it was the end of women dying from abortions.
Right.
And we've... Go ahead.
Since Roe v. Wade, since not long after Roe v. Wade, this issue has electrified the right wing, and it's been used by their demagogues to derange people into madness and anger, and they turn out in huge numbers to vote. On the left, it's been okay. We've won this right, and ho hum. But faced with the Supreme Court overturning it, is it going to drive people to vote in the kinds of numbers that it's driven the right over the years?
It's such a fundamental right. If you can't control your own body and you can't control the size of your own family, and men and women alike, the numbers are huge when you poll favorability of keeping abortions legal. The vast majority of Americans agree with that. Now, they may not agree with every single nuance of that, but in terms of taking away that right, that is not a popular position in this country. So I really do think that it will be a very important issue led by women but supported by men and families and people who believe in this fundamental human right of bodily autonomy. The Republicans, I just have to say, talk about bodily autonomy when they talk about not having to take any kind of vaccine, right? Even though it threatens everyone else if you're not vaccinated. But for women, the very idea to take that fundamental right that affects them personally only and their families, but is unthinkable in the United States, and women aren't going to take it.
Good. And neither are a lot of men like me. They're just appalling.
Yes, I know.
Appalling decisions. But I don't think I don't count on the Supreme Court protecting this right. Not this court.
You know what? I think that we will see even OBGYNs saying, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let my patients die. Women, before Roe v. Wade, and I remember those times, and I have friends who put their lives in danger in order to have an abortion. But there was an organization in Chicago called Jane that actually made arrangements for women to get abortions, and even trained women, especially, and recruited nurses, et cetera, to do abortions. But more than that, what I'd like to see a national strike that women and men who support them just say, I'm sorry, we're not going to do anything until this right is restored. I am ready to take to the streets on this one, and I think a lot of women and providers, and I hope businesses weigh in on this, and I hope insurers weigh in on this. It costs a lot for insurance companies to fund childbirth, and it's just a horrible, unthinkable idea to take away that right.
So while we're on horrible, unthinkable ideas,
okay.
We Democrats and people who live in democracies, we're normally optimistic. We're not by nature pessimists. So it's hard to imagine worst case scenarios. But then there are, some right-leaning writers like Bob Kagan who've always been a little pessimistic. And he wrote this piece in the Washington Post recently that said, are you kidding? The right wing is trying to destroy the democracy and create minority rule in America. Look what they're doing in every state where they can, to be able to not just make it harder to vote, but to be able to change the voting results after the election. And that we should take it very seriously. And at this very moment, I think, or maybe in a couple hours, the former president is heading to Iowa to gin up his base to be back in the fray. And we now know from your friends in the Senate that who've released yesterday the 9 times he called on the Justice Department to steal the election. Are we going to get legislation passed that will preserve the democracy in time?
Well, we certainly have the legislation ready to go.
Yep.
And the question is the filibuster in the Senate, because it does appear that the Republicans who are in charge, Mitch McConnell, who to me epitomizes really the evil of taking away our democracy, which is amazing because he's always been
amazing.
Kind of an institutionalist, you know.
Yep.
Right. But we have to have the votes, and I am still hopeful that we will see the 50 Democrats along with our vice president break the tie before it's too late to make sure that these states cannot enforce what would absolutely be undoing, legitimate elections, changing the like what Trump wants to do.
Yep, minority rule.
The election was stolen.
Absolutely minority rule. So you have, but for those 50 votes to matter, Jan, they have to get rid of the filibuster.
That's what I'm saying. We are going to have to, and we're going to have to get the support of Sinema and Manchin,
yep.
Who have said that they're against it. And my hope is that we can get a carve out at the very least, not for everything that they're filibustering and holding up. That's very important, but on protecting our democracy, on making sure that elections are fair, that the majority will rule, that the person who gets the most votes and it's certified. I mean, on January 6th, it was an amazing day. But one of the things that was most amazing to me is that Nancy Pelosi, whose life was threatened and her staff was in grave danger, and our members said, we are going down to the floor of the House on this day designated to certify the election of Joe Biden as president. And do you know, most of the Republicans voted against that. They voted that Donald Trump won the election. What is going on here? So unless they've already demonstrated that unless we take serious action to protect our democracy, they will steal it.
Yeah,
that will be the big steal.
But it's only the Democrats they have 100% of the burden is on the Democrats. And we have to rise to the occasion because we cannot count, just as we can't count on the Supreme Court to protect absolutely rights that women need and are essential. We can't count on Republicans in Congress to protect our democracy. We can't count on them at all.
So I honestly do believe that we are going to get there. That especially all the revelations are shown. You mentioned how many times the former president. All the terrible things they did and are doing right now, state by state. Mm-hmm. That we will see the saving of our democracy. Something that all the Democrats are going to be able to stand up and do. Right now, we would be able to, if we had just a couple more votes, we would be able to do it.
Do it right now, yeah. But we don't. We have to do it with to quote a just former Secretary of State, you go to battle, not Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Don Rumsfeld, you go to war with the troops you have. right? This is what we've got.
Well, we're at war. I mean, we have HR 1 before the people legislation. Manchin himself has introduced the Voting Rights Act.
Yep.
And so, if he is serious about that and wants it to happen, then there's only one way to do it. We have to have the votes to do it.
Yep.
So but the fact that he did introduce that piece of legislation makes me think that something will finally convince him that the only way to go is to get rid of the filibuster. And what Americans need to understand, too, is the Senate of the United States is not particularly a small d democratic institution to start with. If you live in Wyoming, you as an individual have about 80 times the voting power of someone who lives in California. Because
you get 2 senators, even though you only have 4 people voting.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so you start with it not being especially Democrat, and then you add that you need another 10 votes to get something done. That has not always been, and it should not be, but certainly shouldn't be a weaponized to take away fundamental democratic rights, small d democratic.
Yes, you can't transform the country into something that is unrecognizable as a democracy by the filibuster. That's unconscionable.
No, it is. It is. I mean, the laws that they have passed are just so unbelievable. You can't bring water to somebody who is standing in line. Just all the
but meanness is part of their brand.
Yeah, mean is the point.
Yeah.
That's what they want.
Yeah. But I'll live without the water, but the fact that they can send their partisans not to count the votes after, and they can change the votes after, that is really terrifying.
And it goes to show, too, that where they have done these audits,
nothing.
Biden got more votes than he did before their stupid audit.
And yet, they still want to investigate more.
I know.
Then, the fog is part of their strategy. Okay, in the moment we have left, a little bit of time, you do so many things, and it's so important if we're going to restore faith in our democracy for people to understand how hard the elected officials who care about our government work and the breadth of things they have to be good at. I mean, you focused on auto safety. You're focused on the Facebook whistleblower, just enormous amount of issues that take real work. It's not just the kind of politics they see on TV.
No, but here's what I want to say. The outside pressure is at least equally important as what members of Congress do. I've been an organizer really most of my life and still consider myself that way. If people, just everyday people, will mobilize, contact their legislators, get involved, yes, demonstrate peacefully, as John Lewis would say, get in trouble, good trouble.
Good trouble.
And he was good trouble. Then we can win. Without public opinion expressing itself, we can't do it. And so, I spend a good deal of my time trying to motivate people to know their power. I say, know your power. If you make calls, if you show up, if you send your emails, it makes a difference. I get a report every single week on, you'd be amazed, 10 or more letters or calls are reported to me.
Mm-hmm.
And politicians can do one thing really well, count votes. And so if they're really getting pressured from their constituents, that's combined with good work by elected officials, we can win this. When we fight, we win.
Well, we're in a fight, that's for sure.
Oh, for sure.
We are so lucky to have you in that fight and doing the job that you do. I'm grateful for your time, and I hope we talk again and celebrate some enormous victories in the weeks ahead.
I look forward to that. Both seeing you again, talking with you again, and winning some big votes.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hide your daughter for me.
I will. Take care.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
That was Jan Schakowsky, very able representative of the 9th District in Illinois. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to another very able congressman, the great Danny K. Davis.
NBC News Radio, I'm Chris Coraggio. The United States will be holding a meeting with the Taliban this weekend. Jim Forbes has more.
Multiple outlets report a U.S. delegation will meet face-to-face with Taliban representatives. It's the first face-to-face meeting between the two sides since American forces withdrew from Afghanistan in August. CNN reports one of the topics will be the continued safe passage out of Afghanistan for U.S. nationals, foreign nationals, and Afghans who want to leave. I'm Jim Forbes.
Former Trump aide Dan Scavino is formally being ordered to testify before the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. A subpoena was reportedly served at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida on Friday. According to CNN, the committee had previously been unable to locate Scavino, who served as a White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Communications. The subpoena for Scavino was issued late last month, along with the ones for Steve Bannon and former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and others. The new Texas abortion law is back on the books, at least for the time being. The 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals granted a temporary stay Friday night after a lower court blocked the law. Texas passed legislation earlier this year banning abortion after a fetal heartbeat was detected. It allows private citizens to civilly sue abortion clinics, doctors, and anybody who aids or abets the abortion, even if they didn't know it was going to happen. The officer involved in the shooting of a black Wisconsin man last year will not face federal criminal civil rights charges. The Department of Justice made that announcement Wednesday, saying there is not enough evidence to prove Kenosha police officer Rustin Sheshki, who is white, violated Jacob Blake's civil rights. Video of the August 2020 incident shows Blake trying to get back into the driver's seat of a car during a traffic stop as Sheshki grabs him by the shirt and shoots him in the back several times. Blake's injuries left him paralyzed. You're listening to the latest from NBC News Radio.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT Willow Springs is powered by ComEd. Lower your energy bills and reduce your carbon footprint with the ComEd Energy Efficiency Program.
Morning, Mama. How you feeling?
Great, and I'm ready for you today.
I'm checking in on you. Morning meditation?
Check.
Dressed and ready to work out?
Check.
Check your blood pressure yet?
And check.
Boom! Great job, Mom. And about those gold earrings?
No, ma'am.
Now more than ever, it's important that we protect our hearts and the hearts of those we love. Monitor your blood pressure daily and help each other stay motivated. Rally your squad to take the online pledge at releasethepressure.org. Brought to you by the Release the Pressure Coalition and the Ad Council.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
We are back, and in a moment, hopefully, we will have Danny Davis, the congressman from the 7th District, join us. But while we wait, I wanted to talk about the president's visit to ex-president's visit to Iowa today and what he's trying to do, and put some context around it. Last week, I went into a deep dive into the ongoing threat to our democracy. And, you know, we talked a little bit about it with Jan Schakowsky just now. And I'm going to be a broken record on this because it's so important. Let's remember that the Republicans are engaged in a state-by-state effort to change election laws. They've passed measures that will allow them to intimidate voters, show up, stand behind them as they vote, in some cases stand behind them and be armed while people vote, to suppress the vote by making it harder to vote in some districts, limiting the number of polling places, restricting the hours that people can vote, stopping mail voting and the like. And that wasn't enough. They've now passed laws that will allow the elections to be subverted by giving partisan actors the right to throw out votes they don't like. And I know it's hard to hear that and believe it, but believe it, those laws have passed now in states. And here Democrats can be guilty too. The practice of radical gerrymandering means that some people's votes count an awful lot more than others. You have Wisconsin, for example, where the majority of votes are Democratic votes, and big majorities support the policies that Democrats are fighting for in that state, and yet the Republicans have a stranglehold on the legislature because of the way they've drawn the maps, right? Diluting some kinds of votes and making others stronger. All of these things are an attempt to change the country that we have known for so long into something where we have a kind of minority rule. And I need everybody to be vigilant about this. And last week we also talked about the use of lies and the constant effort to spread doubt and distrust as a strategy to make it, to give cover for using those election laws that they're passing. Oh, we doubt the election. We claim there's fraud. There's no fraud. We pretend there's fraud. We lie about fraud enough so that we give cover to the apparatchiks that have been put in place for the purpose of changing the results. The same kind of thing that Donald Trump tried out in this last election. And now we know, because the Senate Judiciary Committee issued a report just last night that shows how this man who is now campaigning again in Iowa, this traitor to the oath he took, attempted to get the Justice Department to overturn the results of the election on 9 separate occasions. 9. And that doesn't include his efforts to get election officials in states to overturn the results, nor does it include the push to get the vice president to deny some of the electors, nor does it include the insurrection he fomented to stop the certification. We are a democracy that the world looks up to. We have to be worthy of it. We have to put an end to this rolling insurrection and strengthen our democracy. We must push the members of Congress in every state, and only the Democrats, Republicans will not do it, to protect the vote. They have to suspend the filibuster for the purpose of protecting the democracy, and every single Democrat has to vote for legislation that protects the vote. And look, that won't be enough. The right wing has armed its phalangist wing, and they regularly threaten violence. And we saw it in D.C. On January 6th. We saw it with the attempt to kidnap and kill the governor of Michigan. Can I just hear that in America? A group of people, armed political activists on the right, sought to kidnap and kill the governor of Michigan. I can barely say it. It's so appalling. And of course, there's the garden variety intimidation. Then they show up at school board meetings and lie about what people are trying to teach and do this or the other day on the streets in New York, there was a COVID testing tent and they ran by and dumped it over. This kind of right-wing phalangist violence has no place in a great democracy. All of this is not new. There's a historical precedent for this. It happened like this in Europe in the 20th century when democracies were overthrown by totalitarians, whether that was fascists in Italy or Nazis in Germany or Francoists in Spain. This is their playbook. It hasn't changed. People, after all, haven't changed. But America's supposed to be a stronger democracy. and we have to live up to it. And as you heard from Jan Schakowsky and have heard from other people here, there's a lot of hard work going on to protect democracy and to do the work that government needs to do. And to get it done, everyone needs to get involved. Now, just so we're clear, I think this is a war for our democracy. I think this is the very thing that American heroes died for in World War II, to make the world safe for democracy. But I am not arguing that we, who want to protect democracy now, should take up arms against our fellow citizens. That's the argument on the right. That's the phalangists. We have to work within a system we love and make it work for these things. So if you hear this and you think I'm telling you this war requires you to go out and get armed and stare down your neighbor with his submachine gun that he likes to carry around from military surplus, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we need to organize. We need to fight the electoral battle. We need to fight the political battle. We need to fight to change the way we look at this democracy and understand what it means while we still have it. And if we do, we will send a message to the rest of the world, to the Chinas and the Russias who are saying that democracy's day is over, that we can't face our problems. You've heard for a couple hours today and in weeks previous, you've heard how hard people work to do the work of government. In fact, the democracies are getting things done and doing a remarkable job. We're doing it here, and yet our democracy itself is under this unprecedented, terrible, terrible threat. I promised you also last week a deep dive into American history, and particularly the era around Reconstruction, which was the last time these kinds of issues played out in our country. The enormous partisan energy that led to very similar things, people cheating on elections, people spreading lies about what was happening in the polls, armed phalangists again, as there are in the right now, and racial animus underlying them in a way that I think it continues to do. And let me pause on that for a minute and on that racial animus question and ask, have you guys seen Tucker Carlson talk about replacement theory and what he thinks that means? I mean, his lot were the guys who had no trouble when immigration was capturing and enslaving people and putting them on a boat and bringing them to America, right? And now they're saying, oh, well, somehow the Democrats want to change America. Well, you know what? Whether it was the people that were captured and brought here in slavery or the businesses and farms that said, hey, we are desperate for cheap labor. We want, we're going to import folks to do that. And now these people are voters. And suddenly the right has said, oh, you know what? You're changing America. You know what? We're going to change democracy because now that they're voting, democracy is not such a good idea. Really, seriously? If you're appalled, get on the phone and don't just call me. Call your members of Congress. Get involved in democracy. Nothing's more important. Okay, so here's where we are. Hang on one second, everybody. Is that the congressman? No. All right. Here's where we are. You know that this week, under intense pressure from businesses, the GOP agreed at the last minute not to filibuster the debt ceiling. What that means is they would not, on their own, cause the entire American economy to crash, right? They said, okay, we won't bear the entire blame for making the American economy a crash. But they also offered 0 votes to raise the debt ceiling. 0, not 1, again. And, some may say they did this because they were pressured by American business not to be so irresponsible. I don't believe it. I don't believe there is a level of irresponsibility they would not go to. And they haven't earned our trust. Haven't earned it. Mitch McConnell said our job, when Barack Obama was first elected, our job is to make him fail. This is not what a loyal opposition does. So they haven't earned a different view. In my view, they caved at the last minute here because they want to protect the filibuster, because it is their best weapon to cause havoc. And as we were talking about with Jan Schakowsky, it is a weapon we must take from them if we're going to pass meaningful voting rights legislation. So here's what I need you to do. And I mean it. Find a Republican who can still be saved and help open their eyes to the lies and the dangers. Do it. You must know somebody. Do it. Talk about the actual work, and I spend time on this show so you have this information. Talk about the actual work that legislators and members in local government are doing. Not just the political wind that obscures government work, but the actual work of governing. People have to know that their government does a job, and an important job, and the people in it work hard. Third, spread word, not just about shows like this one, although I personally hope you do that and you get more people to tune in with you and call in. But also, other shows that provide information on what's going on in policy and practice, not just politics. Really in the weeds, it matters right now. Fourth, get involved. Get involved in campaigns both locally and in the states that matter. And you can get involved in campaigns now. There's great technology Democrats have, so you can be involved in campaigns in any state you want. You can help be part of the team that makes calls into those states. You can help the get out the vote effort in those states, and you don't even have to travel to do it. We have marvelous technology. You can sit at home and be involved in campaigns in 50 states. You can thank Jamie Harrison and the new leadership that he's brought to the Democratic National Committee for this, and I urge you with all my heart, particularly in this part of the country, what's going on in Michigan and Wisconsin is in Pennsylvania. These are the places where our democracy will be saved, or whether history will have terrible things to say about this generation. Get involved. Get involved. Finally, you must have the strength to imagine the worst that can happen to our democracy. You must have the strength to imagine the terrible things that can happen, and we'll talk about that more next week. But then I want you to have the courage to be optimistic that we can prevent it. I believe we will win this fight, but I believe it because I know how hard so many of us are working to win it. And if we do, then I think we usher in, for the whole world to see, a new effort of a more inclusive democracy. It's something the entire world needs. That's how important this battle is. Anyway, I wanted to have a chance to say that to you, and since we have trouble finding Congressman Davis, who was going to join me today, I wanted to spend time on this. But I see I now have a caller from North Carolina, and Matt, you're on the air.
Hey, how's it going? I'm a peace activist. I'm 62 years old. I've been going to Washington for at least 24 years to go and protest, okay? So, and I go around and I talk to people. I think I've been through at least 44 states. And Europe, I've been to at least 10 countries in Europe and 5 countries down in South America. And I could tell you right now that, for the last 20 years, what I've been noticing here in the U.S. is that conversation from the Democratic Party, not just the Republicans, the Democrats who've been in Congress, they've been shutting down our voices. So my voice is not heard anymore on certain radio stations. You can't call in. You can't listen. And the Democrats are doing that. So if they're saying that they're trying to help people, they're not. So when you say Republicans, people say Democrats. We have to have somebody in Congress that is not talking is doing action, because these people have been talking for a long time, but you know what? They haven't been doing anything, because I've been there in Washington protesting about them, Democrats and Republicans, not doing...
Is your issue, let me interrupt for 1 second, your issue is issues of war and peace or something else?
War and peace, environment, health care for every human being in the U.S. of A., just about all that. Veterans care, you know, all this PTSD, all the suicides, the police officers that I read, I think 2 years ago, and I haven't read it, kept up on the numbers, but we have at least 230 police officers that commit suicide.
Yeah, it's been very rough. Okay, Matt, well, listen, thank you for your call. I appreciate that. I don't agree with all of it, but I appreciate your calling and sharing your opinion. I want you to know you're welcome to call anytime. On health care, I think it's been a priority of Democrats to pass health care reform, and there's plenty. There's more money for it in the bills that they're trying to pass right now. The one area where I think you have my agreement in a sort of bipartisan area is in the area of war and peace, where both parties have been willing for too long to keep our troops around the world in battles where we should have known better. But I applaud Joe Biden for ending the war in Afghanistan and bringing us home. Okay, we are at 773-763-9278. I am taking your calls, and Frederick, you're on the air.
Hi, I was just looking at the latest unemployment number. 194,000 payrolls were up in the last month, and it's kind of ironic. It missed the expectation. The expectation was much higher. I work in the industry, and I just find it ironic that more people are getting a job. I can't tell you how many signs I see for, apply here, people asking for jobs. Little restaurants by my house are paying $17 and $18 an hour for people to come work, and people are not working. Part of it is, I think, that some people are still getting paid for not working, and that's where the moral dilemma comes in. I understand we want to help people who lost a job and pay them, but I don't know the exact answer, but there has to be some kind of a cutoff where at some point in time you're expected to contribute also.
Yep.
I think we all should contribute, and at some point in time, if you're able to work, you need to go back and work. No job is beneath us. I have a neighbor who came here from war-torn Europe after World War II. He was making $1 a day. Obviously, this is years ago. But, you look at all the people who came here after the wars with nothing but their shirt on the back. Their countries were bombed away from them. And these are the immigrants that came here and lived in basements and worked and created homes for themselves. And now the people born here, us, spoiled Americans, we get $17 or $18 and we go, oh, that's not good enough. I'm like, just when is a job beneath us?
Well, Frederick, thank you for that. People are going back to work. They're going back to work in large numbers. We didn't see the job growth that we expected, but we did see a lot of job growth. In fact, fastest job growth in the last year that we've ever had as people come back after this pandemic. But there's still structural things in the way. The lack of child care means it's harder for mostly women to go back and take up the jobs they had. That's desperately impacting the very industries that you were looking at, like restaurants. And there are other issues in restaurants that have led people who could find other kinds of jobs to find them. But there are interesting trade-offs around moral hazard that you're talking about when you provide people with support. But Americans, by and large, have shown they want to go to work and are willing to take 2 buses at 5 in the morning to get where they need to for a job for their families, often at wages that barely let them make ends meet. But I appreciate your call, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime. So we're here at 773-763-9278 talking about the state of our democracy. And, I thought the conversations around the fights around abortion rights really interesting that we had at the beginning of the call. For some, it's the most important thing out there, and yet the whole democracy itself, we're having fights about that at the same time. And all of those big fights obscure the daily work that's being done on everything from, let's make our sewers work, let's get the roads paved, let's try and hire police, let's find a way to do this and meet our pension obligations that's fair to taxpayers. How do we be fiscally responsible and do all this work? You heard stuff on that from President Preckwinkle at the sort of executive level. You heard Alderman Sawyer today talk about the work just in the ward level to do stuff for his constituents to make their lives better. And you heard from Jan Schakowsky about the federal level labor that really goes on a variety of legislative fronts in order to make the democracy work. In fact, we are doing a pretty good job of making the democracy work. It seems hard to imagine we want to throw it away. Dave, you're on the air.
Hey, Edwin, on that January 6th commission there, if Benny Thompson doesn't have those four, if they keep thumbing their nose, if he doesn't have them locked up, the Democrats are just going to look weak. Because if you or I, had stood up a subpoena, we would be put in jail.
I believe the Democrats and everyone I've talked to who is part of this has assured me they are very serious about getting to the bottom of this. At the same time, I fully expect the people that they have subpoenaed to run and hide. I mean, they just served Scavino, who worked, in communications for Trump. They just found him at Mar-a-Lago yesterday to serve him again. So I think they are determined to get to the bottom of this, notwithstanding the lies and obstruction and hiding. And to his credit, Joe Biden said, I'm not going to allow executive privilege to get in the way of this investigation. I'm going to turn over these documents from when my predecessor was here. It's very easy for a president to say, you know what, that impinges on me. He wouldn't do it. I think we're serious about getting to the bottom of it. And every day we are getting more to the bottom of it. I mean, it was just yesterday that we learned that Donald Trump, 9 separate occasions, they're all documented now, 9 separate occasions sought to overturn this election. And now he's back out there campaigning again, insurrectionist in chief, traitor to his oath. He should be returned not to the White House, but to a different form of federal housing known as the penitentiary.
I agree. It's just that, we've not done that before, and it's like they're going to just keep running the clock out.
Expect Democrats to have much more courage than you've ever seen. Remember, we have not a single vote to spare. Not one vote to spare. That's how close it is in Congress. And yet, expect them to get their act together and do the right thing. Expect them, demand them to do it, and keep their feet to the fire, but they'll get it done.
Because that, with Chuck Schumer and that, he still acts like he doesn't realize that he's the head and not Mitch McConnell.
Oh, sure. Listen to his speech yesterday. He was very clear. He was on fire.
Well, once he said he had a lot of tools in the toolbox, and he's not using them. It's either that or the tools broke.
Yeah, we're going to get them done. We're going to get them done. And without any help from the Republicans and without a single vote to spare. It's enormously complicated. These are big, complicated bills, too, that require, work. You can't just say, oh, we're going to, they're long, complex, expensive, and they require negotiation amongst ourselves, and I think we're getting there. But it's hard to watch the sausage made. Anyway, I appreciate your call, Dave. Call in again. You're always welcome here.
Be well, Edwin.
Yep.
Bye.
Sean, you're on the air.
Yeah, I've been a lifelong Democrat, and I just want to say I really think this upcoming election could be a turning point and really work against us. We need to focus more on issues. As bad, I think, as Trump was when he was in, he's in the past. And right now, we don't have a good record. We started with the Keystone Pipeline, cutting out union jobs, the handling of COVID, the border crisis, the economy, and then this bill that we have all Democrats in our House, Senate, and the presidency, and we can't do this. I think we have to realize that as great as it is to give everybody everything and have tons of programs, the country is broke. Money is a finite commodity. And you can only print so much. It'd be just like you living at home and you spend more than you make. That only goes on so long. There's countries like, I think, at Finland or Sweden, they only pay out each year in their budget what they take in as taxes. And if they don't take it in, they don't spend it out. We're doing the opposite. We spend more than we make every year, and eventually this is going to create such a huge, huge problem down the road. As great as it would be to have more and more social programs, maybe coming out of COVID, we should say, we'll do without for a little while, just like we ask people to do. We need to do without for a little while till we catch up. And I think that's what people are coming to realize, and everybody's realizing that, because we have the country suffering with inflation that's skyrocketing because we're printing more money, and now we want to print more and have a $3.5 trillion more, which is going to make inflation even worse. And we don't want to give up on any social programs that get politicians' votes, but we're just going to have our children have a worse and worse country. I've never seen it this bad. And instead of yelling at each other across the aisle and saying all Democrat or all Republican, now I think we're really realizing some Democrat, some Republican. We need to soften our tone and stop having a violent tone toward each other. Otherwise, we'll never work together. Schumer, the worst thing he did is when he got up and spoke, and Manson got up and walked away, because after passing what they did, Schumer got up and just berated the Republicans. And how are we going to work together with his attitude like that? That's not right. We're going to get killed in 2022.
Sean, I appreciate your call. We don't completely see eye to eye, you and I, but I appreciate your call. And let me say, let's see, Schumer yesterday, what the Republicans did was they agreed not to filibuster the debt ceiling and bankrupt the country, and instead gave 0 votes to the Democrats who raised the debt ceiling to pay for the deficit that was caused by the irresponsible tax cuts for the rich that were given out for the rich, not for most Americans, the tax cuts that were given out when Trump was president. So the vote yesterday was to go to the market to pay for the deficit for that money that was that gap that was for those tax cuts. I think that is 100% partisan.
That's exactly my point. I think you're wrong. And right away you're calling out, getting angry at one side. We are spending more than we take in. That cannot continue.
Well, that's right. That's why you can't give tax cuts to the wealthy. But
they don't just give tax cuts to the wealthy. I'm not wealthy, and I had a tax cut under Trump.
You did. It was a tiny percent of the very big tax cut. So, but let me say just generally about partisanship. I long for the day, and we had it in my lifetime, when Democrats and Republicans both shared the same goals, but differed on how we get there. One said, "Hey, I think we need to spend money on health care." The other said, "No, I think the private sector can take care of it," but we both had the same goals: get America healthier. Right. We don't share those goals, which is why it's such a problem. I still think there are some people who call themselves Republicans who you can have that conversation with, and I love that. But the ones who are changing the laws to overturn elections and passing those laws, for me, when the democracy's on the line, there isn't a middle ground. But I appreciate your call, Sean. I really do. And I do know how hard it's going to be in the next election.
Can I say one more thing?
Yep.
Do you have a time?
Yep.
Okay, I come from Illinois. Was born and raised in Chicago, Bridgeport. And I know what it's like with the Democratic machine here in Chicago and Bridgeport. And I have seen so much waste. We have a state, for example, that's broke, bankrupt. We have a legal lottery, which is legalized gambling, and we're still broke.
There's no question. There's no question that no party has a lot.
Handle our money better.
No party has a stranglehold on virtue, and there is no question.
Some of these people that handle your money in government. I don't want to trust the government to handle my money anymore. I don't care who they are. Democrat, Republican.
Yeah. No party has, as I say, no party has a stranglehold on virtue. But look, our country's big, and people disagree about stuff. And politics, you may not like it, but that's where we have to come together to get stuff done. Because if you don't have it, and you don't have the kind of politics we have, somebody else has to make those decisions. In China, it's one man. And
he should start talking. A guy like Schumer, if we want to be nice and kind to each other, it's the best thing we do is not say, why isn't the other guy kinder than me?
It's look in the mirror and say, I'll start. So Schumer should have said, thank you for those who worked with me. We'll work together instead of berating Republicans.
Okay, I am all for turning down the temperature where it's possible. And I personally can't do it when it's about overturning elections. But I agree with you. If somebody just disagrees about how to get the job done, that has to be a civil conversation. We need it. That's how democracies work.
Well, the election thing is a whole other issue.
Yeah.
I mean, Hillary, she wanted recounts when she lost before. And, there were people who thought that they had her, cheat Bernie Sanders out of his election.
I think Hillary conceded on election night without a fight. She conceded on election night without a fight. Al Gore, who won more votes, conceded. Could have kept that fight going. He conceded for the good of the country. Donald Trump has never yet said he isn't the president of the United States and has done everything he can to subvert where we are. It's not comparable.
He's a psychotic, crazy man. He should not be
And what you experienced in Chicago, I want to tell you one story.
They voted because they voted for him because they didn't believe Biden. That's the only reason.
Yeah.
Person, I really voted for Trump only because of his business views, and personally, God Almighty, I wish the guy would go away.
Yeah.
But I really see what Biden's been doing financially, and all his stuff is not working. And I've been in the industry, the financial industry, since 1983. And they say he's the worst man for the job. Right. And God forbid if something happened to him, which I worry about his health and his sanity. And then we have a woman who literally only was able to garner about 3% of her own our own party's vote in the primary. So we would have a president.
Well, whenever a vice president takes over, it's traumatic. I agree with that. So let me tell you one story. Since you talked about living in the days of the Chicago machine, when I was an alderman, I had. My ward was in the 9th Congressional District with a very liberal, very well-respected Congressman, Sid Yates, who focused on issues in Washington. And then, for political reasons that we can talk about another time, there was redistricting. And the entire ward was now in the Congressional District of Dan Rostenkowski, who was not known to be a left liberal do-gooder, but was old-school Chicago machine. Right? So I'm sitting in the ward office and the phone rings, and it's Congressman Rostenkowski, who at the time was the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, one of the most powerful people in the country, and he's calling. And I'd never spoken to him. He's like, Alderman, where are you? And I'd be like, oh my gosh, Congressman, I'm in my office. He says, don't move. I said, okay. So I don't move, right?
You were able to breathe, right?
Huh? Yeah.
You were able to breathe? You let your breathe.
A half hour later, he shows up with his entire staff, not his D.C. staff, but his local staff. And he says, I don't know this lakefront where you are. I don't know anything about this ward. You got to tell me. I need to know if there are churches that I should be supporting, if there are charities here, hospitals I need to help. I need to know if the mayor's not delivering on on fixing potholes. I'll stop all the federal money coming to the city. These are my constituents now, and we have to take care of them. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is like a gift from heaven. Where have you been, right? So I am all about good government, not wasting money, and all of that stuff. But one of the things that Chicagoans and our particular brand of politics is about is getting stuff done. Get it done. Get the job done. Do your job in government. And yet there's some waste, and God knows I spent my career fighting that waste. I agree with you about that, 100%. But I'm in awe of people who go to work every day to get the job done for people. Anyway, I really appreciate your calling, and I hope you will do it again.
Thank you.
Okay. Roosevelt, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call, sir.
You bet.
Oh, let's see. Where do I start? The last caller. Oh, man, I was so mad what he was saying. Sorry, sometimes the emotions get the best of me.
So talk about what you believe and don't pick on the guy before you.
Okay, here we go. The line was drawn when the Republican Party didn't do anything when it comes down to our Constitution and this country. What was revealed last week Washington Post, on how Trump was trying to overthrow our government and turn it into a banana republic. Okay, the line was drawn in the sand.
Hey, I like bananas. It's not you're insulting bananas.
Yeah. The line was drawn when he was impeached twice. No president is. I'm sorry if I'm yelling. Twice. No president has ever been impeached twice, and it was all Republicans that stood by him. The line was drawn when he was trying to coerce the president of I can't think of the gentleman's name. When he was trying to hold back money for
Ukraine, the Ukraine. You're thinking about Ukraine.
Thank you. So the line was drawn there. The line was drawn when, as soon as Obama got into office, Mitch McConnell said, and you guys can still find the video, our goal is to have this guy or this president a one-term president. So this idea of us working together is long gone. To this day, today, there is a gentleman that's having a rally, a guy that shouldn't be in the picture. No president has ever done what this guy has done during the presidency and after the presidency. He's still saying that they stole his election.
Yeah, Roosevelt, I agree with you. And you know, the many people say, look, he's in the past, we should be done with him. But he isn't in the past, is he?
So let me go to the present and the future. There are, as far as I'm concerned, there are only 2 Republicans left, or maybe 3, okay? The young lady from Montana, I call her young lady because I'm older.
Liz Cheney, yeah. I disagree with her on almost everything, but I can say with an honest heart she's a patriot. I don't have to agree with her. That's part of what being in a big country and big politics is about. She's a patriot. We disagree on almost everything. She cares about the country and puts it first.
And Edwin, also, the gentleman from here, from our own state of Illinois, the Republican.
Adam Kinzinger.
Those are 2 Republicans that are trying to save their party. There is, as far as I'm concerned, there is no Republican Party. They're traitors. They're anti-American. And to me, they have blood on their hands because when Trump did everything that he did to those people from Central America, those people came here, back to your conversation about cheap labor. Let's not forget what Ronald Reagan did in Central America, those specific countries. That's why these people are coming up here, because of the fact of our interference in those specific Central American countries. Iran-Contra, let's not forget. That guy should have been impeached, as far as I'm concerned. A union buster, that affected our nation too. Jobs, you guys, everybody's always talking about jobs. He directly affected our job industry. Okay, he was a union buster.
Yep.
Okay, let's. Yep. Okay, yep. So all these things affected our country. Things that people that were in the White House, maybe I shouldn't say people, that Republicans were in the White House that caused us to see what the product is. The end result is exactly what's going on now. And that's precisely my point, Edwin. The Republicans get in there, they spend like sailors, and then they say, hey, wait a minute, we can't afford this, we can't afford that.
Yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy. Look, and as I've said to previous callers, I long for the day when the Republican Party is filled with people like Liz Cheney, with whom I disagree. Absolutely disagree. But we can have those disagreements, and we all have to get the votes, and we have to make it work, because that's what a democracy is. You don't agree with everybody. But to have folks who say, look, I don't agree with you, and I don't have the votes, so I'm going to change our system so the votes don't matter. That I draw the line at that. We have fought wars over that, and everyone in Congress, and I have in my life raised my hand and sworn an oath to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States, and we have to demand that people do it. Anyway, Roosevelt, I appreciate your call. Do it again. I'm glad you're a listener. Tell people to tune in.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you for letting me vent. I feel much better now.
Okay, good. I've done my job for healthcare for the day. You take care.
Have a nice day.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
All right, Steve, you're on the air. I know you called in earlier, but here you are.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. And I am like some people. I'm sort of torn. I'm ambivalent about Donald Trump possibly getting the nomination again, because if he were to be defeated, and I contend that it's very likely, it might break the back of this movement for a while, at least. And that, yeah, I think it would get rebranded, but the notion that that Donald Trump is going to be its savior would sort of diminish, and I think really undercut the movement in many ways. Because, keep in mind, he won by just a hair back in 2016. And quite frankly, it had to do with a couple of variables, including, those of us who on the left who pretty much were convinced that, for a year going into the election, nobody's going to beat Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is the de facto winner. Well,
yeah,
that's what a lot of
I hear you, Steve. I do worry that anyone who put his hand on a Bible and up in the air and swore to preserve and protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and then violated that oath the way Donald Trump did, should not, in a democracy, be standing for office. I think it puts us all in danger, even if he loses.
Right.
Even if he loses.
You're absolutely right. No, and I agree with you. Unfortunately, we don't have a mechanism, to keep him from running again under the current system. And, those of us old enough...
Well, hang on now. The election's not for a few years. He could be in jail by then.
Well, again, exactly. That's wishful thinking, but I'm on the same page as you. Let's hope. But having said that, I mean, I think there is a generational change in America, because, those of us old enough to remember when Nixon attempted to pull this sort of thing.
Not close. He did terrible things, no question. He did terrible things. And the Saturday Night Massacre, where he fired the people in the Justice Department who didn't agree with him, right? But he was covering up a crime, but he didn't go out of his way to say elections don't matter, democracy doesn't matter. This is a new place.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that Nixon realized that even within the Republican Party of his day, that there was no way that you were going to get Republicans, as conservative as they might be, to go along with undermining democracy. I mean, these were people who came of age, remembering full well how Hitler and Mussolini came to power in Europe. So I don't think that they would have gone along. But this Republican Party, I'm scared to death. Except for a few days after January 6th, when you saw some semblance of rationality on the part of people like Mitch McConnell, only to then return to, I'm not entirely sure this election wasn't stolen. And basically defending the insurrectionists and that sort of thing. I think this is a different Republican Party. And as you're seeing in states throughout this country, the idea of an independent entity that oversees elections has been supplanted by, the people who are in these Republican-dominated states will be the final word on who won the state.
Yeah, no, they won't, but they're going to try. And as I said before, it's very important that we have the courage to imagine the worst that they can do, because they'll do the worst. Right. But the optimism to know that if we do that, we'll have the energy and the strength to beat them. And I believe that too. Absolutely. I hope you'll listen next week, because I'm going to have a historian on to talk about a very interesting period in American history after the Civil War, when partisanship was as crazy as it is today, and what was good about it, what was terrible about it, what it led to, and there are, it's always dangerous to think that history repeats itself. I don't believe that, but I think there are lessons to learn, and at least it helps us understand the era we're in.
And I think you're right. People often use that phrase that history repeats. History echoes. I don't think it repeats itself.
Well, you'll have a chance to judge yourself. This guy's really good, and we'll talk about this next week. Hey, Steve, I appreciate your calling.
Take care.
All right, so I want to share with you that I forced myself to watch Tucker Carlson on Fox. I think it's important. I think we can't understand what's happened to our fellow Americans if we don't understand the enormous amount of propaganda that they are subjected to on a daily basis. And so I watched. And this is one of the times when he talked about his argument that somehow we're engaged in a giant conspiracy to replace American voters with so-called other people. Other people. His crowd brought millions of enslaved people here from Africa. That was an immigration policy they liked. They filled their factories and farms with immigrant labor who would work for pennies on dollars. That was an immigration policy they liked. And now, I think I may have said this earlier in the show and maybe repeating myself. If I am, forgive me, and call in and tell me. But now, the people they brought, they're casting votes. And so they now say, well, wait a minute, replacement. I don't know. I've said this before. I think this is obviously bigoted, racist stuff, charged. I also think it's on purpose. I think it's from the Kevin Phillips playbook that goes back to 1970. And I understand Kevin Phillips, at 80-some years old, is still alive and well, and maybe he'll call in and try and defend his work that created the modern Republican Party. But remember, he said the party that can keep in its tent the greatest number of ethnic animosities will be able to win elections. And, he was right. He was right. But because that you can do it doesn't mean you should. And people who get elected to office, people that you hear me talking to on this show, that's not what they do, right? They think their job is to bring people together. They think their job is to bridge differences. They think their job is to do the hard work of making this democracy make our lives better. And you know what? For a long time, it has. And I, for one, am not going to be patient or complacent or sit around and be here when we throw it away. We fought for democracy in the 20th century. People went to war for something much different in our century, this fight against terrorism, which in some ways contributed to a feeling of trust in authoritarian government and more oversight. I do agree with some people on the right that our freedom is precious, but I think that many of them have lost their freedom of thought to the propaganda machine that feeds them this nonsense 24 hours a day, whether it's on Facebook or on Fox News. And it's up to us. So again, I urge you to not just, spend the day watching news that has your point of view or listening to me and getting emotional and thinking at the end of the day, oh my God, I'm exhausted from all the political work I've done, just because you're exhausted from listening to these arguments all day long. That's not political work. And I'm glad you're listening, and I want you to listen, and I love it when you call and I love it when we talk, but it's not work to listen to me or to Rachel Maddow or to anybody else tell you what danger we're in. Work is to get involved in a campaign. Work is to get involved and build a stronger community. I mean, if nothing else, go plant a tree. You'll do more for your neighborhood that way. But I urge you, you can do this in Michigan and Wisconsin, even if you live in Illinois. Join the efforts there to protect our democracy. Join the efforts by calling everyone that represents you and demand that we pass legislation to protect the vote, that we do not create the conditions where there's so much lie and chaos spread about government and what it can do and what it is doing, and lies and chaos about whether the vote is legit or not, so that they somehow give cover to pulling the trigger and undermining the whole thing. Then the world goes dark, because if America doesn't stand up for democracy, it's not going to stand anywhere else. And yet if we fight and we beat this cancer in our country, and we bring our fellow citizens back so they recognize what they have to lose, well, then I think we're in for a great era, not just here in America, but around the world, because then the next century will belong to regular people everywhere who can show that they can do the job of governing themselves as free people. As Alderman Sawyer said earlier on this call, they can get the idea of slavery out of their psyche everywhere in the world and stand up as free people. That's a very important, very, very hard lesson. For those of you who are listening who are Jewish, it's the topic of the most important annual Passover dinner, where we talk about how to not still be a slave, and that's thousands of years later. Alderman Sawyer was right to raise it. Many of our fellow citizens, shouting loudly about freedom, have given it up to the demagoguery that has captured them. We have to help them find their own way back to seeing the country we live in. Anyway, that's it for me for this week. I'll give you a little preview. I've talked about it before. The historian I'm having on next week has focused most on the era right after the Civil War, the kinds of crazy contested elections they have, the armed militias that were going around the country at the time, mostly on the right, the incredible violence that was there, and then the deals that finally ended it. The country got less interested in democracy. Didn't get rid of democracy, but it was less. I mean, we still don't vote in the percentages that they did back then. They voted crazy numbers of people went to the polls, just like we are getting to now in this hyper-partisan era. Back then, there wasn't a media that was anybody thought of as telling the unvarnished truth. There was either all the news organizations belonged to the parties, so people had to make sense out of all of that. So in the progressive era, they began to say, you know what, we're going to limit the kinds of noise around our politics, bring the temperature down a little bit, argue about a narrower band of things, and make some enormous progress on issues that matter. So we'll talk about that. Really interesting and I think important as we get ready for where we're coming. And we'll also see in the next week, if Jan is correct, some progress in Washington on these important issues that are really just up to Democrats to negotiate amongst themselves, because, again, there's no help on the other side. That's it for me. I want to thank Paul, who's been working the board, mostly doing heroic work, trying to get everybody plugged in here. I don't know what happened to Congressman Davis. Maybe we'll talk to him again in the future. And, of course, to thank you for listening and spending your time with me on this Saturday. Take care. See you next week.
If you drive a car, truck, SUV, or vehicle of any kind, you need Get Upside, the free gas app that pays you cash back for every gallon of gas you buy. That's right. With the free Get Upside gas app, you can get up to 25 cents a gallon cash back every time you buy gas. Nearly 3 million people have earned cash